The Mute at Hogwarts. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction. So please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 176 Sleeping Beauty. Guan Qiong burst forth with unprecedented speed. The wind whistled in his ears, whipping his wide wizard robes like a bird taking flight. But the bird collided with a spider web. Between him and Hermione, an invisible shield blocked his path. It was the magic generated by the enemy blocking bracelet Lockhart had just thrown. It was like a transparent wall, bisecting the corridor. Guan Qiong braced himself against the invisible wall, the ring on his finger glowing crimson like a flame. Then, flames erupted from Guan Qiong's hand, enveloping him in an instant. The spider web trembled under the scorching heat and began to melt. Guan Qiong exerted force on his hands, his magic continuously impacting the magic circuits before him. He plunged his hands into the wall, tearing violently. The magic circuit blocking Guan Qiong's path wailed, but Guan Qiong tore a hole in it in an instant, and then slowly dissipated. Guan Qiong stepped through the cave entrance and arrived behind Hermione. Hermione's body had already begun to stiffen, and she fell backward. He took a step, and the flames on his body dissipated like a puff of cloud. Then, he hugged Hermione from behind, and a huge surge of magical power surged into Hermione's body, blocking the gray magic circuits that were constantly infecting Hermione's vital circuits. Qiong, Hermione felt as if every part of her body was rusting gears, and her eyes felt heavy. She wanted to fall asleep, but when she saw Guan Qiong, her eyes brightened a little. "Don't worry, Hermione, it's okay." Guan Qiong's face was firm, and he formed a message in front of Hermione with flames. He peered into Hermione's body with his magical vision. The basilisk's petrifying magic circuits had been blocked by the shadow of Gryffindor, and a large part had been reduced, but a lot still remained, infecting Hermione's vital circuits, turning them gray bit by bit. Guan Qiong's only task was to use his magic to block them. He used his immense magical power to diminish the gray magic circuits while observing Hermione's vital circuits. Several areas had already been affected by the petrification magic before he arrived, turning them gray. He had no way to deal with this situation. If he used his magic to attack these areas, it would only damage Hermione's vital circuits and cause damage. He was still a step too slow. If only he had been faster. "Am I going to die, June?" Hermione suddenly asked, a look that was unclear whether it was fear or regret. She felt her body getting heavier and heavier, and she was slowly losing control. Her feet had completely lost feeling, and her hands were turning cold. "No, I told you, you'll be fine." Guan Qiong condensed a sentence into flames and appeared between them, bringing a little warmth to Hermione. At the same time, Guan Qiong had dispersed all the gray magic circuits in Hermione's body and expelled them from her body. Only the gray areas of her vital circuits remained, and that required Mandrake. "Really? That's great." Hermione believed Guan Qiong's words and smiled, her expression lightening. Then she whispered, "Be careful, the basilisk. It's the monster in the Chamber of Secrets." She wanted to give more instructions, but the petrification had already spread throughout her body. Her eyes drooped, her body stiff and cold, like a sleeping beauty. She had fallen asleep. Guan Qiong stared at the completely petrified Hermione. In his magical perspective, Hermione's life circuits began to dim, like the setting sun. From those spots of gray that had been infected, pale gray magical threads emerged, wrapping around Hermione's entire life circuit like chains binding the golden crow. However, Guan Qiong didn't feel disappointed. Instead, he breathed a sigh of relief. Although it wasn't perfect, he had been saved at last, and that gave him some peace of mind. Guan Qiong now turned his attention to other things. He looked at the battle ahead. The shadow of Gryffindor and the basilisk were locked in a fierce clash, emitting a loud clash. Tum. Guan Qiong extended his left hand, and the ring on his finger began to glow brightly. Then, a crimson, intense flame emerged from his hand and charged towards the basilisk. At the same time, he glanced around, and the rubble of the wall, knocked down by the basilisk and the shadow of Gryffindor, transformed into spears under his transfiguration spell. Then, under the influence of the levitation charm, They emitted a whistling, piercing sound as they charged towards various parts of the basilisk's body. The basilisk's head was struck by the sudden burst of flames, but its gray-green scales glowed with a black light, blocking all the blaze. However, the light and intense heat carried by the flames struck its eyes, ultimately causing some damage. As for the speeding spear, it only made a crisp sound when it struck the basilisk's scales, and then was no longer effective. Although Guan Qiong's current strength was formidable, it was still insufficient against a Millennium Basilisk and the combined power of Slytherin, unable to truly harm it. Damn it! Guan Qiong gritted his teeth. His future potion was still not finished. However, the basilisk seemed to sense something. It hissed, gazing at Gryffindor's shadow and Guan Qiong with its fangs. Hiss 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 hiss. Then, it roared at the corridor ceiling. SSSSS, open. A hole appeared in the ceiling. Gryffindor's shadow tried to intervene, but the basilisk simply flicked its tail, knocking him back. Guan Qiong cast a spell, but the basilisk ignored it, resisting with its body and entering the hole. The hole then closed, leaving no trace. Only Guan Qiong, Hermione, and Gryffindor's shadow remained in the corridor. Gryffindor's shadow turned, revealing the vague figure of a humanoid, though his face and other parts were blurry. Only his eyes were clear and bright. Now, those kind eyes, tinged with guilt, gazed at Guan Qiong and the petrified Hermione in Guan Qiong's arms. He seemed to want to say something, but it was clear that, like Guan Qiong, he was unable to speak. In the end, he could only gently wave his sword, carving a sentence in the air before it dissipated. I'm sorry. Guan Qiong looked at the words left by the shadow of Gryffindor, his expression unchanged. All the disadvantages in the world are due to the lack of ability of the person involved. Guan Qiong said to himself in his heart. I will kill Tom Riddle. Guan Qiong said to the petrified Hermione. Chapter 177 The Confused People. When Harry arrived at the hospital, the first thing he saw was Hermione, quietly sitting in bed reading. Next to her, Gwen was magically manipulating a knife to peel an apple. In another bed, Ron lay unconscious, his face pale as if he'd been the one attacked. What's going on? Harry asked worriedly. God knows what had just happened. Just as they were getting ready and about to begin the match, Professor McGonagall rushed out and announced the match was cancelled. As he followed the crowd back to Hogwarts, bewildered, Professor McGonagall informed him that Hermione had been attacked and Ron had also had some issues. Oh my God, weren't the attacks over? After all, it had been 4 months since anything happened. He'd assumed the heir of the Chamber of Secrets had become frightened and wouldn't dare attack again. Oh, Harry, I'm so sorry I can't go to your match, Hermione said apologetically, setting down her book. Her voice wasn't as strong as before, as if she was losing confidence, and her eyes were tired. The match is cancelled, Harry replied, looking at Hermione with confusion. They said you were attacked, yeah, just now. I almost thought I was going to die, but thankfully, Guan Qiong arrived in time to save me. Hermione patted her chest with a lingering fear. Guan Qiong had also peeled the apple and handed it to Hermione. Oh, thank you. Hermione held out her hand, but suddenly she froze. Petrification suddenly appeared from her hand, moving across her arm, then covering her entire body. Sorry, it seems I can't eat for a while, Hermione said regretfully, her expression frozen. In the blink of an eye, Hermione went from her normal self to a silent stone statue. Hermione, Harry exclaimed, looking at Guan Qiong and asking anxiously, what's going on? Guan Qiong silently took the apple back and took a bite. The apple's abundant juice soaked Guan Qiong's throat, suppressing the molten lava in his body. Don't worry, it's just a normal phenomenon. Guan Qiong rubbed her fingers together, and a light appeared, explaining to Harry. This is indeed a normal phenomenon. From Guan Qiong's magical perspective, Hermione's vital circuits dimmed again, then took on a gray hue. The gray spots infected by the petrifying magic circuits faded slightly, replaced by a slight change in Hermione's entire vital circuits. According to Madame Pomfrey's examination, thanks to the shadow of Gryffindor and Guan Qiong's intervention, the infected area of Hermione's body was far smaller than that of the other victims, making her condition much better. I've never seen anything like this before, but I'm sure it won't harm Miss Granger. We just need to give her some time to recover, Madame Pomfrey said. Guan Qiong observed that Hermione's vital circuits, in the process of fighting the gray spots, were constantly absorbing the power, thus strengthening themselves. It's probably similar to the production of antibodies to a weakened virus. Madame Pomfrey advised that during this process, it's best to avoid external influence or the use of potions, let everything run its course. Thus, Hermione's current situation arose. Her life circuits constantly devoured and assimilated the infected gray dots, while also being affected. When their power level was low, she would become petrified. Once their power was restored, Hermione would return to normal. This cycle would repeat until a stable state was reached. At that point, Hermione would fully recover. Her life circuits transformed, and she would possess special abilities. At the very least, she would be immune to the spell of total petrification. After reading Guan Qiong's explanation of Hermione's condition, composed of dots of light, Harry breathed a sigh of relief, his worries easing. He looked at Ron in the other bed and asked, "What's wrong with Ron? Was he attacked too?" Guan Qiong didn't answer directly this time. Instead, he stared at Ron silently, his eyes flickering. Finally, he sighed and shook his head. "I don't know. Dumbledore needs to answer that question." "Okay." Harry walked over to Ron's bedside and looked at him worriedly. Ron wasn't in good condition. He was pale, with a deep, bandaged wound on his hand that looked like it had bled profusely. His brow was furrowed, and he was sweating profusely. "He's got a fever," Harry said hurriedly, patting Ron's head. Madame Pomfrey gave him some medicine. "Is that so?" "I hope Ron's okay," Harry said, looking at Ron worriedly. He looked far worse than Hermione. Guan Qiong looked at Ron, her brow furrowed slightly, a thoughtful glint in her eyes. It was undoubtedly Ron who had acted as a location for the Chamber of Secrets, summoning the basilisk and Tom. This was something the professors and Guan Qiong had just discovered. They had discovered a blood-based ritual in an abandoned classroom on the 5th floor. Later, they found Ron unconscious in the school's gallery, a deep wound on his body, confirming that he had been responsible. Recalling Ron's condition over the past few days, Guan Qiong had reason to believe that Tom had exerted influence on Ron and had controlled him today, forcing him to do all this. But how, exactly, had Tom done it? Guan Qiong couldn't figure it out. Ron showed no trace of magic at all. Even when he scanned him with his magical vision, his body was remarkably clean. Even his life circuits were as authentic and intact as ever. Dumbledore was also puzzled by this. He had just examined Ron again with his senior eye and found nothing amiss. No trace of magic, not even a trace. This was incomprehensible, and even Dumbledore couldn't understand the reason. Puzzled, Dumbledore led the professors and Madame Pomfrey in the library, discussing and researching, trying to find the answer. After all, without understanding the cause of all this and Tom's methods, there was no guarantee that other students wouldn't experience the same situation. Guan Qiong was also thinking about this question. He had a feeling that the answer was actually not complicated, but he and Dumbledore and the others had not thought of that angle yet. Chapter 178 Guan Qiong's Anger. After 4 months of peace, another attack struck the school, plunging the students back into a state of fear. They stopped discussing Quidditch, Hogsmeade, or which teacher's class was the most difficult. Instead, they focused on a single topic, the Chamber of Secrets. The school activated its emergency plan, prioritizing students' safety. Students were required to cease all activities and return to the common room by 6 p.m., and all movement was to be under the supervision of professors. Even going to the bathroom required a professor's presence. No student objected. Even Fred and George, the previously most active brothers, became obedient, unwilling to challenge school rules. After all, this was a matter of life and death. However, there were always a few students who had their own opinions: Guan Qiong, Harry, and Ron. Guan Qiong's presence became erratic. He would often be seen returning to the Gryffindor common room, only to disappear the next moment, as if he had vanished. By the time Percy frantically went to find Professor McGonagall, Guan Qiong was sitting normally in an armchair in the Gryffindor common room, leisurely reading a book. According to others, no one had ever left the Gryffindor common room, and no one had returned since Percy left. This made Percy feel extremely awkward. After a few such incidents, Percy stopped paying attention to Guan Qiong. He figured it was probably because Guan Qiong's presence was too low, so he was easily overlooked, leading to such incidents. It made sense. After all, Guan Qiong never spoke, just quietly reading. Amidst the clamor of the students, he was easily overlooked. Only Guan Qiong knew the reason for this. He had cast a presence-dispelling charm on himself, but on previous occasions, he hadn't left the common room, giving Percy, a prefect, A few instances of crying wolf, although this wasn't entirely worthy of Percy's loyalty. Guan Qiong could only offer a silent apology. He had a reason to leave. The room of requirement. Guan Qiong gazed at the crucible before him. The straw formed from the timekeeping rings had already fused to its final stage, leaving only a tiny amount to dissolve into the liquid within. This was his second attempt at brewing the potion in recent times. The previous one had failed, costing Guan Qiong half a month of his time and a considerable amount of materials. However, Guan Qiong had discovered the problem: the timekeeping rings. Their slow onset of effect was originally an advantage, as it prevented them from affecting other potion ingredients and causing them to be affected by time. However, this was also the reason why, after Guan Qiong added his own blood, the timekeeping rings in the future potion had already absorbed the rest of the potion before their effects could fully take effect. It was similar to adding blood to Polyjuice potion first and then adding the longevity flower. This, of course, was not allowed, and Guan Qiong disposed of that future potion. What lay before him was Guan Qiong's second batch of Polyjuice potion, having added the partitioning herb and the lily of the valley flower to ensure the order of their effects. However, whether it would succeed or not still depended on its brewing. Guan Qiong's eyes were dark, suppressed by anticipation and unspoken anger. Yes, anger. He wasn't as calm as he appeared to be about Hermione's attack, especially when he saw her lying in his arms, slowly turning into a statue. The feeling was even more profound. It was as if a flame was burning from his guts, threatening to burn him from the inside out to ash. If it weren't for this attack, he wouldn't have realized how much Hermione had left in his heart, so much so that he couldn't bear to see her suffer even the slightest bit. Of course, he was also well aware that this wasn't a romantic attraction, let alone love. It was simply his affection for a kind, brave, enthusiastic and lively little girl who had been with him for 2 years. But that was enough. Guan Qiong stared at the potion in front of him, his face cold. He had never been so serious before, not even when he discovered Tom had disappeared from the diary, not even after Christmas, when he discovered something was wrong with the entire school. At that time, despite some inner turmoil, he didn't take it too seriously. He knew that someone would eventually deal with these matters, either Harry or Dumbledore. After all, that was Tom, Voldemort's memory, a matter belonging to another storyline. He could intervene or leave it alone, and there would be no problem. So, he had been relaxed, not focusing all his attention on it. But now, the situation had changed. Guan Qiong raised his left hand, and a ball of fire emerged from it. The flame twisted and swirled, slowly forming a thick, long shape, like a snake. Basilisk, Tom. Guan Qiong's eyes shone with a silver light, like the cold moonlight. He would make them pay, he would kill them. This was his anger. Harry and Ron sat together in the Gryffindor common room. Ron had returned to school after 3 days in the hospital, a relief to Harry and the Wheel-Eyes who had been worried. If he didn't return, rumors that he had also been attacked would spread. But no one knew what had happened to him. Not even Ron himself. "You mean you don't remember anything?" Harry whispered. All the Gryffindor students were in the common room, and he didn't want anyone to overhear his conversation with Ron. "No, I just remember that I was planning to go with them to the Quidditch match that day. Then, I seemed to have a dream, and then I woke up in the hospital," Ron whispered. His face still retained some of its paleness, but the wound on his hand had healed, which wasn't a big deal to Madame Pomfrey at the hospital. "Okay," Harry nodded. "Then do you know who attacked Hermione?" "I forgot to ask," Harry said. He'd been too nervous to think of that question immediately, and by then, Hermione had been petrified again. As for Guan Qiong, he hadn't been able to find a way. Guan Qiong was so elusive, she'd vanished without warning. Ron nodded, a flicker of panic across his face. He glanced around, making sure no one had heard, then whispered, "It was the basilisk." Chapter 179 Tom's backup plan, Lucius's appearance. "Basilisk!" Harry screamed, appearing. Ron, standing nearby, had anticipated the incident and covered Harry's mouth, preventing anyone else from noticing. Only after Harry calmed down did Ron release his hand. "Did Hermione say that?" Harry whispered. It was no wonder he was shocked. He'd only ever seen a basilisk in books, back when Dumbledore was doing Valentine's Day events. Basilisks were so rare that Harry even briefly thought they didn't exist, simply because their appearance was so bizarre. Legend has it that they were hatched from a rooster's egg by a toad. It was incredibly strange, no matter how you considered it. Hermione said it, but she petrified again before she could say anything more, and then Professor McGonagall brought me back, Ron said helplessly. It's a shame I didn't get a chance to ask Joan, otherwise we'd know much more, Harry said regretfully. Harry, tell me, is there a possibility? Ron hesitated, then spoke slowly. You know, a basilisk is something few people could possibly keep. You mean, Hagrid? Harry understood Ron's words. They had suspected Hagrid before, as he always had a special affection for these large, dangerous creatures, so this time wasn't out of the question. Furthermore, with Tom's help, Harry had seen what happened 50 years prior and was certain that Hagrid had once kept a monster in Hogwarts Castle. He wasn't sure if it was a basilisk, though, the information didn't reveal what it looked like. Yes, perhaps we should ask him, at least to explain what happened 50 years ago, Ron nodded. Harry pondered, and honestly, he was quite tempted. As a Gryffindor, when faced with something like this, it was almost impossible to expect him to just sit in the common room and wait it out. You're right, Ron, we should talk to Hagrid, Harry nodded. Perhaps I should get out my invisibility cloak, Harry added, looking at Percy, who was sitting by the Gryffindor exit, reading. Lucius Malfoy, wearing a black traveling cloak, walked across the Hogwarts lawn. He was indifferent to the surrounding scenery, and he hadn't considered taking the opportunity to visit his son in the castle. At this moment, he had only one goal in mind, the dilapidated cottage at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. In his hands, he held a long scroll of parchment, bearing the signatures of all the directors of the school board. He had obtained this at great expense, and to be honest, he had even used some shady means. He didn't want to do this, but he had to. Thinking of the letter sent home, Lucius's face was solemn, especially the signature at the end, which almost made him breathless. He didn't know how much the Dark Lord had recovered now, but he knew only that he had to obey the Dark Lord's orders. For the sake of his family's continuation, he had to do this. Lucius walked up to the cabin and knocked loudly on the door. Before the person inside opened it, he had already adjusted himself, reimposing himself as an aristocrat. A cold, contented smile graced Lucius's face as he strode into the cabin and spoke with the air of someone in command. I heard the headmaster is here. In fact, upon entering, he spotted Dumbledore standing inside. Of course, he also spotted the others, the short, stout Minister of Magic, Fudge, and the gruff, large Hagrid. He understood that Fudge was coming to take a large man away, to Azkaban for a few days, perhaps forever. That was good news. What are you doing here? Get out of my house, Hagrid said angrily. Believe me, I wouldn't want to be in this place if it weren't for some reason. It's not even the size of my own bathroom. Lucius Malfoy glanced around, a sneer in his face. What do you want with me, Lucius? Dumbledore asked, his expression not particularly good. Dumbledore had anticipated Fudge's arrival. He had mentally prepared himself and taken care of other things, but Lucius's arrival was completely unexpected, and it also left him with a lingering sense of unease. I'm sorry, Dumbledore. You're a brilliant educator, but I must admit, this year has been truly disastrous, Lucius said, pulling out the parchment. There have been so many attacks this year that the Board of Trustees is beginning to doubt your ability. Of course, I personally believe you, but they disagree. Here are the signatures of the 12 trustees. I think you need to leave Hogwarts for a while and get some rest. Oh, no, why not, Lucius? Fudge spoke before Dumbledore could reply, looking a little panicked. I don't think it's a good idea to remove Dumbledore from the school at this time. Is there anyone else capable of stopping the attacks? This is the board's decision. I don't think the Ministry of Magic has any control over this area, Lucius said calmly. Dumbledore stared into Lucius's cold gray eyes with his piercing blue eyes. After a moment, he spoke slowly. If this is the decision of the board, Lucius, I will of course relinquish my position. However, I cannot understand why you would do so. It would do you no good. Besides, I don't think the board has yet decided who will replace me and deal with these attacks. Panic flashed in Lucius's eyes. Dumbledore was right. The board had merely signed the suspension order. No one had decided who would replace Dumbledore. After all, who could claim to have done a better job than Dumbledore, the greatest wizard alive? If he couldn't handle the attacks, who could? That's a matter for the board to consider. I don't need to tell you, Lucius said firmly. Of course, Dumbledore sighed. He suddenly glanced toward the corner of the room and said, but I'll be back when the school needs me." With that, Dumbledore walked out the door as the others watched. Hagrid took a deep breath and said cautiously, "If anyone wants to find something, they just need to follow the spiders and they'll find the right direction." Lucius and Fudge looked at him in confusion, unsure of what he was talking about. But Hagrid ignored him. He put on his moleskin coat and prepared to leave with Fudge. Before leaving, he added, "Someone needs to feed Fang while I'm gone." Hagrid then left. Lucius and Fudge, though puzzled, didn't think much of it and followed suit. The door slammed shut, and Hagrid's hut fell into silence. A moment later, in the corner, Ron pulled off the invisibility cloak, revealing him and Harry. Both looked panicked. They knew Dumbledore, the school's patron saint, had left. Chapter 180 Forbidden Forest Exploration. News of Dumbledore's departure spread faster than expected. By lunchtime the next day, the entire school knew. It wasn't known where the news had spread, but Harry and Ron were certain Malfoy was involved. His smug demeanor made it clear he had played a role. The news of Dumbledore's departure instilled a deeper fear in the students. Everyone was terrified. The rising temperatures and increasingly scorching sun offered no comfort. Hogwarts Castle seemed to grow colder from the inside out. The professors patrolled more frequently, their presence everywhere, raising suspicions of their doppelganger magic. But their expressions remained grave, growing more so as the day wore on. However, the attacks remained puzzling, even though Dumbledore was no longer in the school. In potions class, Guan Qiong listened silently to Snape's lecture, pondering. Due to the curfew, Snape's private instruction and Hagrid's patrols of the Forbidden Forest were banned, leaving Guan Qiong with more time on his hands. However, he didn't do much else. He simply practiced spells, brewed potions, and contemplated a way to permanently slay the basilisk and Tom. It was clear that he would use the future potion he had created and brewed to grant himself the power of the future. That power was immensely powerful, and he had experienced it before. However, he felt it wasn't enough. After all, no one could predict what might happen in the Chamber of Secrets. This year had already seen so many unexpected events, even Dumbledore couldn't fully grasp them. He had to consider more. After class, Guan Qiong gathered his things and prepared to cast a dispelling existence charm on himself before going to the room of requirement to check on the future potion. This was his third attempt at brewing the future potion. The second attempt had unexpectedly failed, but Guan Qiong had gained a great deal of experience from it, and this time, he was confident it would succeed. At that moment, Harry suddenly ran over to Guan Qiong and said repeatedly, "Qiong, Qiong, wait a minute, I have something to tell you." Ron also appeared from the other side, sandwiching Guan Qiong in the middle, as if afraid that he would suddenly disappear. Guan Qiong often did this. "What is it?" Guan Qiong waved her hand lightly, and the light points condensed into a sentence. Harry and Ron looked at each other and nodded. "Oh, that's right," Harry swallowed, then continued. "Before, Ron and I went to see Hagrid." Guan Qiong frowned, and Ron continued, "It was the night Hagrid and Dumbledore left. Harry and I hid in Hagrid's hut with our invisibility cloak and witnessed the whole thing. We met Fudge, the Minister of Magic, and Malfoy's father, Lucius. He brought the signed suspension order from the school board, the one who ordered Dumbledore to leave. Then, when Dumbledore and Hagrid left, they said something I thought I should tell you," Harry said. "Dumbledore said, he'll be back when the school needs him, and Hagrid said, if you want to find something, follow the spiders." Honestly, that made me feel bad. Ron's eyes trembled, remembering something bad about spiders. When he was a child, Fred and George had scared him with spiders, and it had been a traumatic experience in his childhood. Spiders? Guan Qiong looked at the two of them and remembered that Hagrid had raised a giant acromantula 50 years ago, and now, that spider was in the Forbidden Forest. So, Guan Qiong rubbed out a light spot and looked at the two of them. He seemed to know why they came to see him. Harry and Ron looked at each other again. After a while, Harry slowly said, "There aren't many spiders in the castle, but we finally found a few in the past few days. According to my observation and Ron's observation, we found that those spiders are heading into the Forbidden Forest." Yes, Ron swallowed, and it seemed that speaking was very difficult, but he still said, "Qiong, you often patrol the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid, so we thought, if possible, you could take us into the Forbidden Forest. That would be safer, wouldn't it?" Harry seemed to be trying to convince Guan Qiong, but also to convince himself. Both men looked at Guan Qiong nervously. Honestly, they weren't just worried Guan Qiong wouldn't take them to the Forbidden Forest, They were also worried Guan Qiong wouldn't let them go. If Guan Qiong told Professor McGonagall about this, they would definitely be punished with detention. Of course, they believed Guan Qiong wasn't that kind of person, but that didn't stop them from worrying. Fortunately, Guan Qiong only thought for a moment before nodding. Okay, I know what Hagrid wants us to find. We can go together, Guan Qiong said, flashing a light. You know, my goodness, man, I knew it. You've been with Hagrid for 2 years, you must know a lot, Ron said happily. Guan Qiong nodded. Although he didn't know this from Hagrid, it was almost the same. Thinking of Aragog, the giant acromantula in the Forbidden Forest, and its children, Guan Qiong's eyes gleamed. Perhaps he could find some help. After all, who knows what they might encounter in the Chamber of Secrets? Although the basilisk is the spider's natural enemy, natural enemies are not always guaranteed, especially for magical creatures. Recalling the things she'd read in books, Guan Qiong smiled. The three of them agreed to set out tonight, Guan Qiong's first nighttime excursion. Midnight arrived, and the last of the Gryffindor common room had gone to bed. Hogwarts fell silent, save for pale, white ghosts drifting about. The professor's patrols also began to slow down. After all, they weren't ironclad and needed rest, which greatly facilitated Harry, Ron, and Guan Qiong. Harry and Ron walked around the castle cloaked in invisibility cloak, while Guan Qiong followed them, casting a disappearance charm. This was their plan. Guan Qiong could have cast a disappearance charm on all three of them, but that would have made them unable to sense each other, so they opted for the invisibility cloak. Guan Qiong had a way of seeing the cloak's traces, allowing her to follow them. They dodged the professors along the way, primarily Harry and Ron. Guan Qiong's disappearance charm, a special kind of magic she'd learned from a unicorn, was so undetectable that the professors couldn't detect her without pre-prepared magic. Guan Qiong estimated that perhaps only Dumbledore could see through his magic at a glance without any magical assistance. Chapter 181 Aragog. Harry and Ron walked across the lawn until they reached Hagrid's hut. Harry quietly asked if they could take Fang along, but Gwen refused. Fang was just an ordinary hound. Facing the magical creatures of the Forbidden Forest was too much for him, which was why Hagrid considered him timid. Harry and Ron agreed and headed into the forest. The bright moonlight cast a silvery glow over them, allowing them to see each other clearly. Gwen appeared nearby, pulling a potion from his pocket and drinking it. Invisible magical circuits emerged from his body, connecting one end to his brain and the other to his side like a speaker. Which way should we go now? Ron glanced nervously. The cold night and the gloomy woods made his feet tremble slightly. The thought of werewolves and other dangerous creatures in the forest only made him more panicked. Gwen looked around, then tapped her finger, and a small spider took flight and appeared before them. Follow the spider, Guan Qiong said softly, setting the spider down. The faint boy's voice echoed through the forest, creating a small ripple, but quickly died away. Qiong, you? Harry looked at Guan Qiong in surprise. He had just heard something, and Guan Qiong had actually spoken. The potion's effects. Hurry up and follow, Guan Qiong explained softly, then followed the spider, heading in a direction within the Forbidden Forest. The spiders would head in the general direction of Aragog, and then Aragog's descendants would notice them and appear before them, leading the way. Of course, if they cast a Lumus spell or set the surrounding area ablaze, Aragog's descendants would notice them even faster. However, it's also possible that other creatures of the Forbidden Forest, such as centaurs or werewolves, would find them first. The group moved forward at a rapid pace. Guan Qiong's eyesight was excellent, and even in the moonlight, she could still see the spider's movements. Harry and Ron followed Guan Qiong closely, making sure not to fall too far behind. Low branches and thorny vines blocked their path, but Guan Qiong used magic to move them aside, preventing them from slowing down. The ground was also quietly shifting, with moss growing thicker and the air thicker in humidity. They had undoubtedly passed the outer reaches of the Forbidden Forest and reached its deeper depths, for they had been walking for a full half hour. Not only Harry and Ron, but even Guan Qiong had never ventured this far. His previous patrols had always been conducted along the safer paths of the outer perimeter. Guan Qiong suddenly stopped and looked around. The moonlight in the sky remained unchanged, but the dense branches and leaves blocked out the light, making the surroundings much darker. What's wrong, Qiong? Harry asked quietly, standing beside Guan Qiong. Ron also looked around nervously. Only then did they realize how brave they had been, daring to come to the Forbidden Forest so late at night. Even if they died in an accident in a place like this, no one would have noticed. Fortunately, Guan Qiong was there, giving them a sense of security. "Something's coming," Guan Qiong said. He looked to his left, where the grass obscured the darkness, but his magical vision allowed him to spot something behind it. It was a mysterious creature the size of a horse, its life circuit composed of a central core and 8 slender limbs extending outward. It looked like a spider. Or rather, it was a spider. Guan Qiong's ears twitched slightly, and his sensitive ears seemed to hear a clicking sound. It was looking for an opportunity to hunt. Guan Qiong made a judgment, but for some reason, it didn't attack, simply watching Guan Qiong and the others from the side. Guan Qiong waved his left hand, and a bright light appeared on the ring. At the same time, a ball of fire flew in the direction, startling the thing in the darkness, and Guan Qiong made a sound at the same time. It was indeed a giant 8-eyed spider, the size of a cart horse, with 8 eyes, 8 strangely long, hairy legs, and a pair of large, gleaming black claws. The giant acromantula looked at the 3 people before it. It didn't flee because of Guan Qiong's flames, but it also didn't attack them, as if something was intimidating it. Harry and Ron gaped at the sudden appearance of the giant spider, panicking. Ron took 2 steps back, even considering fleeing. Fortunately, his mind told him that he was safest staying with Guan Qiong, which prevented him from running away. Guan Qiong frowned and stared at the spider before him. After a moment, he spoke. "Take us to Aragog." At the same time, he emitted points of light, which combined into the shape of a giant acromantula, modeled after the spider before him, but larger and older. Why, the giant spider clicked its claws, making sounds. It possessed the ability to speak with its claws, but it didn't seem very skillful. It couldn't say much, nor could it understand complex meanings. However, Guan Qiong seemed to hear a hint of worry in his voice. Strange, what was it worried about? He wasn't going to blow up their nest. "Hagrid sent us here," Guan Qiong said, forming Hagrid's massive body with dots of light. Hagrid stood beside Aragog, seemingly unobtrusive. "Hagrid, my friend," the spider called out. Then, after glancing at Guan Qiong, it finally turned and headed deeper into the Forbidden Forest. "Follow," Guan Qiong said to Harry and Ron, quickly following. Panic spread across Harry and Ron's faces, but there was nothing they could do. Now they couldn't leave, so they followed Guan Qiong to what might be the spider's lair. "If I'd known we were here to find a giant spider, I wouldn't have followed," Ron whispered to Harry. Honestly, he regretted it a little. He didn't understand why Hagrid had called them to the Forbidden Forest to find spiders, even though they and Harry had intended to ask Hagrid if he had raised the basilisk. It couldn't be a spider raising a basilisk. If it did, it would have been a toad. "Keep your voice down and follow me." Harry wasn't that frightened. After all, Guan Qiong was beside him, and judging by his expression, he was clearly prepared. Otherwise, Guan Qiong wouldn't have prepared a potion that would allow him to speak. After an unknown amount of time, they reached the edge of a wide hollow. The trees had been cleared, revealing a misty, hemispherical spider web. Surrounding it were countless giant spiders, each as big as a cart horse. Harry began to worry. With so many spiders, even Guan Qiong wouldn't be able to handle them. The spiders led Guan Qiong and the other 2 to the center of the hollow. Surprisingly, the surrounding spiders didn't come forward when they saw them. They all just huddled in their places, staring at the 3, as if in fear of something. Aragog, while Harry was confused, the spider that had led them began to call out into the web. Chapter 182 Show of Strength. Following the spider's cry, a giant acromantula slowly emerged from the misty hemispherical web. This spider was a size larger than the others, its body and legs a grayish hue of age, and its eyes were covered in a film of white, as if it had cataracts. "What's going on?" Aragog asked, his claws clicking. "Aragog, Hagrid sent us to find you," Guan Qiong called out. He stepped past the spider that had led them and approached Aragog, gazing at his 8 blinded eyes. Those were not caused by other beasts or magical creatures, but rather by Aragog's own aging. "Hagrid," Aragog said hesitantly. "He never sent anyone to our hollow before, that's true, but things have changed now. He's in trouble and been taken to Azkaban." Guan Qiong kept his mouth shut, but a voice suddenly appeared around him, a voice within his mind. "And he should have told you about me. My name is Guan Qiong." Guan Qiong. Aragog made a clicking sound and moved closer to Guan Qiong, as if wanting to observe her more closely. But to Harry and Ron, it looked as if the monster named Aragog was about to eat Guan Qiong. They grabbed each other in panic, wanting to shout, but their words caught in their throats. Yes, Hagrid told me that he had a henchman, and he wanted to introduce him to me, but I refused. I don't trust others, the elderly Aragog said, lowering his head, as if to sniff Guan Qiong's scent. You smell very strange, Aragog said, but he didn't say anything more, simply shrinking back to his original position. What do you want? Aragog asked Guan Qiong. The thing from the Chamber of Secrets at Hogwarts has come out. It's a basilisk, I think you know. Basilisk, Aragog said in fear, shrinking his body 2 steps further, as if trying to completely tuck himself into the hemispherical spider web. Yes, the basilisk, your spider's natural enemy. You fear it? Guan Qiong looked at the terrified Aragog and the surrounding spiders that tried to gather around him. They seemed unable to grasp the meaning of the word basilisk, or perhaps they simply wanted to protect Aragog. After all, he was the ancestor of all spiders. Yes, I fear it, all spiders fear it. It's in our bloodline, but as long as we stay in the Forbidden Forest, it won't bother us, Aragog said. In that case, why not kill it? Guan Qiong smiled, though Aragog couldn't see it. Kill it? Aragog was horrified. If he hadn't been blind, he would have stared at the young wizard in front of him with shock. He actually said kill it, kill the basilisk, and said it so easily. Did he think the basilisk was just a small snake on the side of the road? Or did he think the magic he learned in school would be of much use? Yes, kill it, Guan Qiong said confidently, gazing at the swarms of spiders around him. They gathered around him like shadows in the night, creating an oppressive atmosphere. This is not a good idea. You probably want to send my children to their deaths, but that's impossible. Not only are we no match for the basilisk, but we also can't die for your sake, Aragog said. Death is inevitable, but rebirth is equally alluring. Aragog, don't you want a second life? Aragog fell silent, once again gazing at Guan Qiong with its 8 blind eyes, as if hoping to see Guan Qiong's face, but that was clearly impossible. After a long pause, Aragog spoke again. It's indeed tempting, but it's too difficult. I don't see any hope of success, Guan Qiong smiled. Knowing his persuasion was on the right track. Aragog was already very old, and for a being nearing death, nothing was more alluring than a new life. And Guan Qiong happened to know a way to give Aragog a new lease on life. Basilisk. It's true that the basilisk is the natural enemy of all spiders. Any spider facing it will only face defeat and death. However, the basilisk is also a great tonic for spiders. Its life circuits can provide them with immense nourishment, even giving them a second chance at life. Guan Qiong had witnessed this before, Norma and Hagrid. Last year, Norma's constant battles with Hagrid had caused both Norma's and Hagrid's life circuits to grow and evolve to varying degrees, precisely due to their natural enemy relationship. Since then, Guan Qiong has become curious about this situation and has read extensively in the library. When planning to seek Aragog's help, Guan Qiong had the idea to approach this issue. After all, nothing is more alluring than a new lease on life. Aragog had to admit that the young wizard's words had indeed given him an idea. As aging deepened and death drew closer, he felt a growing urge within his bloodline for something that could allow him to break free from his cocoon and be reborn. That something was the basilisk within Hogwarts Castle. It was a natural enemy, but also a powerful tonic. But it had to admit that even in its youth and greatest strength, it trembled in the face of the basilisk, let alone now. As for the children in the family, they might obey its orders and take action, but at most, they would only be adding fuel to the basilisk's fire. Difficult doesn't mean impossible. Besides, you're not fighting alone. I'll also help, Guan Qiong said, summoning the magic within him, stirring up a gust of wind. Now, the task was to convince Aragog that they had the strength to slay the basilisk. Aragog sensed the changes around him, and after a moment, he uttered a deep voice, "Your strength is indeed considerable compared to other young wizards, but it's not enough. What about this?" Guan Qiong extended his left hand, and the ring on it shone brightly. A ball of flame appeared in Guan Qiong's hand, expanding until it was forcibly compressed with a freezing spell. As the magic power was injected, the flame continued to expand and shrink, finally condensing into a bright dot, just like the light point created by Guan Qiong's fluorescent point. But within it, there was the power of destruction. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183 ready. The surroundings grew quiet, the clacking of the spiders' chattering faded. The loudest sound in the nest was Harry and Ron's breathing. They lacked the keen instincts of magical creatures, unable to grasp the power wielded by Guan Qiong's hand. If that bright spot of light were to explode, the entire hollow would be reduced to ruin, and no creature within would survive. Guan Qiong's eyes shone with a silver light, like the first light of the moon in the darkness. A tiny spark of light hovered in his hand, seemingly delicate and feeble. But Aragog sighed deeply, his eyes, shrouded in white, as if he could see it. In fact, he did see it. Every thick, long hair on his body saw it, and they pulled Aragog's skin with all their might, forcing him to flee. But Aragog remained motionless, even moving closer. What a powerful force! If it were that kind of power, it could indeed inflict damage on the basilisk, Aragog exclaimed in admiration. Guan Qiong released the fire in her hand and looked at Aragog before her. So, can we cooperate now? Let's kill the basilisk together, Guan Qiong said. Indeed, Aragog said, his voice rising to a crescendo as he moved his massive claws. However, we can't enter the castle. The Hogwarts professors won't let us in, Aragog said. It was indeed a difficult problem, but Guan Qiong was prepared. Dobby, Guan Qiong whispered. With a loud crack like a whip, the house elf Dobby appeared. His presence startled the spiders around him, causing the clicking noise to intensify. Dear Mr. Guan Qiong, and dear Harry Potter, Dobby is so glad to meet you. I wonder what you've called Dobby here for. Dobby, clutching his tattered clothes, saluted Guan Qiong and Harry, then noticed the spiders around him. This place doesn't seem safe. Do you need Dobby to take you away? Dobby stared nervously with his tennis ball-sized eyes, filled with panic. Dobby, Harry exclaimed in surprise. He hadn't expected Guan Qiong to send Dobby over. Oh, my goodness, a house elf, Ron whispered in surprise. Guan Qiong ignored the surprise of the two men behind him. He looked at Dobby and said, Dobby, I have something I need your help with, Mr. Guan Qiong, is there anything I need? Dobby will do his best to help Mr. Guan Qiong. By the way, are you really not leaving here first? Dobby said nervously. No, Dobby, Guan Qiong looked at the ragged elf. I need you to use the spell from before and place the entrance to that spell here when I need it. The spell from before? Dobby has no problem. But Mr. Guan Qiong, that spell has a very short range, Dobby reminded Guan Qiong. That's a matter of power. You don't have enough, Guan Qiong said. I'll take care of that. All you have to do is come out and help me when I call you. Of course, I won't let you help me in vain. After this mission, I'll give you what you want most. Dobby raised his big eyes to Guan Qiong, a little excited and a little flustered. I will give you freedom. You want to be a free elf, don't you? Guan Qiong's voice seemed to penetrate the human heart, stirring Dobby's heart. Dobby wants freedom, Dobby repeated, but then he grabbed his long ears and pulled them outwards. Bad Dobby, how dare Dobby think that? Bad Dobby, Dobby screamed at the top of his lungs, yanking at his ears, startling everyone around him. Guan Qiong ignored Dobby's self-torture. His actions proved that he had a plan in mind. And that Guan Qiong's plan would work smoothly. He turned to look Aragog before him. This is the plan. On that day, Dobby will use magic to bring you to that battlefield. Together we will fight the basilisk. Then, you can obtain its heart. Is that a problem? No problem, as long as this elf can lead us in. Aragog controlled his claws, making an excited clicking sound. Very well, then, we'll leave. You wait for the signal, Gwen said, grabbing Dobby's hand to stop him. Dobby, take Harry, Ron, and me out of here, back to the Forbidden Forest. Yes, Mr. Gwen, Dobby said after a pause, then obeyed. Gwen called Harry and Ron over, and they joined together. Dobby snapped his fingers softly, and with a loud, crackling sound, they vanished before the spiders. On the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest, next to Hagrid's hut, with a loud, crackling sound, Gwen, Harry, Ron, and Dobby appeared hand in hand. Fang, noticing the sudden appearance of the outsider, let out a low growl, but upon smelling Gwen, he came running over, tail wagging. Quiet, Fang, pretend we weren't here. Gwen rubbed Fang's head, then let him go, pretending nothing had happened. Amazing. Is this a house elf? Why not let it take us straight to the dormitory? Ron looked around in amazement. Are you planning on waking up all of Gryffindor? Guan Qiong asked. Given the noise of magic, and the stillness of the night, Guan Qiong had no doubt that everyone in the tower would be awakened and discover their nighttime wandering. Alright, Ron scratched his head. Mr. Guan Qiong, respectfully, Harry Potter, Dobby will be leaving now, Dobby said, his ears drooping, seemingly uneasy. Well, remember to wait for my news, Guan Qiong waved. Dobby started to speak, but in the end, he only whispered, I understand, and fled. He truly desired freedom, his heart told him that with absolute certainty. But he also felt a deep loathing for his own actions, a loathing that emanated from his very blood, as if innate. Why do you do this, Qiong? Giving a house elf freedom? There's no need to ask his master for permission, Ron asked. He serves the Malfoy family, Draco Malfoy's family, Guan Qiong said. Oh, is that so? That's exactly what we should do, Ron beamed. Being able to free the Malfoys from a house elf was a very good thing, no matter how you looked at it. Guan Qiong smiled and said nothing more. Of course, that wasn't his reason, after all, he had no grudge against the Malfoys. As for helping Dobby gain his freedom, there wasn't really any noble or lowly reason, it was simply his usual code of conduct. Those who helped him would be rewarded, and those who offended him would be punished. In other words, repay kindness with kindness, and repay grievances with justice. Chapter 184, Ginny's Attack. The third brewing of the future potion was successful, just as Guan Qiong had predicted. Guan Qiong looked at the potion in his hand, which was shimmering with silvery light, resembling time and the stars, and an expression of excitement crossed his face. Now, everything was ready. He was already impatient. It had been almost a month since Dumbledore left the school, and it was already May according to Professor McGonagall. Hermione's condition had stabilized, but now she would need a longer period of petrification to fully recover. She might be able to make it in time for the final exams. Professor McGonagall humorously commented that this was probably the only good news in a while. After that night outing, Harry and Ron heard of his bold plan and wanted to join in. Although they couldn't comprehend the true power of the basilisk, they, the Gryffindors, were determined to protect the others in the school. I read in a book that the basilisk is afraid of roosters. Maybe we could buy one through an owl and smear its blood on the sword. That would definitely be effective in slaying the basilisk. Ron even offered a suggestion to Guan Qiong, but Harry immediately refuted it. It's just the crowing of a rooster, Ron. Maybe we could use a tape recorder to record the rooster's sound, like the one that June used. Harry offered another idea. Guan Qiong rejected all of these ideas. The Chamber of Secrets contained more than just the basilisk, there was also Tom and perhaps other things. When the time came, only strength, not these little tricks, would truly be effective. Guan Qiong didn't outright reject Harry and Ron, but instead said he needed to prepare some things and told them to wait for his notification. Guan Qiong's idea was to handle everything himself and then tell them about the incident that hadn't happened and that they hadn't been able to get in touch. This would be best for everyone. However, Guan Qiong encountered a problem. He couldn't find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. In Myrtle's bathroom, Guan Qiong stared at the sink. A small snake was carved on the side of a bronze faucet. But from Guan Qiong's magical perspective, there was no trace of magic, it was just an ordinary pool. Even if he found Harry and had him speak Parseltongue, it would be useless because there was no passage behind it. Guan Qiong frowned. He had already searched the entire castle, but hadn't found any way to enter the Chamber of Secrets. No wonder none of Hogwarts' headmasters had ever found the Chamber of Secrets. No wonder Dumbledore had to lure Tom out before sealing the passageway. Unless someone opened it from the inside, the Chamber of Secrets was inaccessible from the outside. It sounded a bit like the Threes banished the lost seal in reverse, or perhaps the Three had discovered the chamber's condition and applied the same seal from the outside. But if that was the case, how would he enter the Chamber of Secrets? Had Ron summoned Tom again? Or perhaps Guan Qiong pulled out a tape recorder he'd lent Hermione. Hermione had left it running during the attack, so it had captured everything. When he heard Lockhart ask Hermione to scout the way, Guan Qiong's eyes grew cold, but he didn't move. This recording would at most cost Lockhart his position as professor, but wouldn't have much of an impact. Besides, he still had a legion of rabid fans who might turn against Hermione. Guan Qiong, on the other hand, wanted to completely deprive Lockhart of everything. He had a plan, but it took place after the Chamber of Secrets. Guan Qiong flipped the recorder, letting it play the rest of the recording. Hiss 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 hiss. The basilisk's voice emanated from the recorder, its penultimate words before it departed. Guan Qiong took the recorder, his eyes flickering as he glanced at the sync. He seemed to have guessed what it meant, but he needed confirmation. Guan Qiong, holding the recorder, left the bathroom, ready to find Harry. On the way back to the Gryffindor common room, Guan Qiong noticed something was wrong up ahead. A man was lying on the ground, but no one was paying attention. The professors gathered around Harry, who was standing in the middle, questioning him. Harry wasn't in good shape. His wizard robes were torn, and his glasses were broken and hung crookedly on his nose. He shouted something to the professors around him, pointing to a spot on the ceiling. Ginny attacked Professor Lockhart first, then attacked me. I don't know why, maybe she was possessed by something. She took my wand, used magic on me, and tried to take me to the Chamber of Secrets. Ron pushed me out of the way, and then a huge snake came out from above. It must have been a basilisk. It wanted to capture us all, but you guys were too quick, so it only had time to grab Ginny. Ron grabbed Ginny's hand and didn't let go, so he was also taken in. Go save them. They've been taken to the Chamber of Secrets. They're in danger, Harry shouted hoarsely, not even bothering to be polite to the professors, and his words became rude. However, the professors, including Snape, ignored this slight. They exchanged glances, their eyes communicating something incoherent. We'll go and save them, Professor McGonagall said solemnly. But I also need to ensure your safety, Harry. Come back to your dormitories with me. But, Harry tried to say something, but Professor McGonagall's stern expression told him there was no room for negotiation. Meanwhile, Madame Pomfrey finally arrived from the hospital wing. Seeing Professor Lockhart lying on the ground, she quickly bent down to check on him. But she first smelled a foul odor, then noticed that Lockhart had opened his eyes. What's wrong? What's wrong? What happened? Did something just attack me? Lockhart exclaimed in an exaggerated voice, standing up and looking at the others. His expression didn't seem fake, but all the professors looked at him with indifference. It looks like something really attacked me. Damn it. Those creatures didn't dare to use direct force, so they resorted to these little sneak attacks. It seems the comfortable life at school has numbed me. I actually fell for it, Lockhart continued brazenly. He looked at Harry with an exaggerated expression. Well, Harry, are you okay? They seemed to be coming for you, which made me let my guard down. But luckily, I'm here, and they were afraid of me, so they didn't continue. Oh, well, it's okay, Harry muttered, as if he had thought of something. Then, I'll take Harry back to the common room. Gilderoy, you should go back to your office too. The school isn't safe right now, Professor McGonagall said coldly. She wanted to use a mocking tone, but her good upbringing and the current situation made her reluctant to interfere in Lockhart's affairs. That would be great, but if you have any action, remember to call me. Don't forget. I am a Knight of the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, but no one paid any attention to him. Professor McGonagall took Harry away, and Madame Pomfrey followed him to help him look after his injuries. Snape and Flitwick studied the ceiling, trying to find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. But they were doomed to return in vain. Guan Qiong frowned and followed Professor McGonagall, followed them into the Gryffindor common room, and waited until Professor McGonagall and Madame Pomfrey left before removing the magic on her body and revealing herself. Harry was in a very low mood. He didn't know how to face the other members of the Weasley family, and he couldn't find anyone to talk to. At this moment, Guan Qiong appeared. Chapter 185 Entering the Secret Room. So, you're saying you just wanted to go to the bathroom? Guan Qiong asked, having just asked Harry for some details. Yes, Ron and I were planning to go to the bathroom, and since we needed a professor to accompany us, Percy called Lockhart for us, and then Ginny said she wanted to come too, Harry said with a sad face. He couldn't understand why Ginny had taken his wand and attacked them. Could it be that Ginny was the heir to the Chamber of Secrets? But she was a Gryffindor. Guan Qiong frowned. There was no doubt that Ginny had fallen for some trick of Tom's. But what could so silently control someone without them noticing? Especially Ginny. Since the start of school, he had scanned her countless times with his magical vision, but he hadn't noticed any unusual signs of magic on her. Moreover, compared to Ron's previous abnormality, Ginny hadn't shown any signs of strangeness. Of course, It was also possible that Guan Qiong hadn't paid much attention to Ginny. After all, she was a first-year student, and their interactions were rare. But for these matters, it's better to ask Tom directly in the Chamber of Secrets. Guan Qiong took out the tape recorder, turned it to the back, and placed it in front of Harry. "Harry, listen to this and tell me what it means." Harry looked at the tape recorder in confusion, and then he heard a low snake sound. "Hiss hiss 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 ha ha, bring Harry Potter to me," Harry exclaimed, then translated the words to Guan Qiong with a confused look on his face. Is this the sound of the basilisk?" "Yes, Harry." Guan Qiong put away the tape recorder and looked at Harry. "The basilisk is targeting you, but why? Is it because I can understand Parseltongue, or because I'm a Slytherin?" Harry asked puzzledly. "This would take a long time to explain, and there's a lot I don't understand, but I know where to find the full truth." Guan Qiong looked at Harry, his eyes seemed to speak, and Harry read a lot in Guan Qiong's eyes. "Chamber of Secrets," Harry whispered. "Are you taking me to it?" "No, more accurately, you're taking me there. But you have to understand, it's very dangerous." "I'm not afraid of danger," Harry exclaimed. He felt his insides ignite like wood, his mind racing. Guan Qiong gave Harry a deep look and nodded. "I'll keep you safe." Guan Qiong no longer hesitated. He had been prepared for this, but he just couldn't find a way to get to the chamber. After casting a dispelling presence charm on himself and Harry, telling Harry that the destination was Myrtle's bathroom, they left the Gryffindor common room one after another. It was afternoon, and the common room wasn't too crowded either. The professors were busy trying to find a way to rescue Ron and Ginny, and couldn't see the room for the time being, giving Guan Qiong an opportunity and time. He made his way to the bathroom, stopping by Lockhart's office to leave something for him before finally reaching the bathroom. Harry had been waiting for him for a while. "How do we get to the chamber?" Harry asked anxiously. He was now incredibly worried about Ron and Ginny's safety. Though only a moment had passed, his anxiety was still agonizing. Guan Qiong glanced at the pool. Unlike before, as if sensing Harry's presence, a complex network of magical circuits appeared behind the pool, as if a passageway had connected them. Sure enough, Guan Qiong reached into her pocket, feeling for the 2 bottles of potion inside. She pointed her wand at the copper faucet on the pool. "Speak to it in Parseltongue and say open." Harry stared at the spot, confused, but he obeyed Guan Qiong and tried his best. "Open, open, open." Harry tried several times, sometimes hearing human voices, sometimes a dark roar. At that moment, the faucet began to respond, spinning rapidly, and then the pool began to rotate, and the contents above it separated from the center. Soon, a huge hole appeared. The hole was as tall as a man, and its interior seemed pitch black, like a portal to hell. June, Harry turned to look at Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong's eyes were now coated in a silver light. He gazed at the hole and nodded. "Well done." Guan Qiong waved his wand, levitating himself and Harry, and simultaneously released a ball of light, illuminating the path ahead. Then, the 2 of them floated directly inside. After a moment, the hole began to recede inward, as if about to close, but a figure rushed in at breakneck speed and leaped into the hole. Guan Qiong and Harry flew at a steady pace. Guan Qiong was a little unaccustomed at first. After all, it wasn't like riding a broom with a fixed foothold, but after a while, he adjusted to the situation and even had the leisure to observe the traces of pipes nearby. "This is going under the castle. It's too deep," Harry muttered quietly, but his voice still carried far. Guan Qiong looked around cautiously, ignoring Harry. The path here was winding, and except for the Loomis spell, it was pitch black, frightening. Initially, Guan Qiong heard some movement behind them, but it seemed to be heading in a different direction and soon faded away. After flying for about 10 minutes, Guan Qiong and Harry finally reached the bottom. They emerged from the pipe and entered a dark stone tunnel. It was vast, but it was clearly not where Guan Qiong and the others wanted to go, as there was almost nothing here, only a path ahead. Guan Qiong emitted several balls of light, letting them float ahead, providing light like streetlights, and then led Harry forward. It was utterly silent, and the breathing of Harry and Guan Qiong was unusually loud, as if ringing in their ears. Harry felt goosebumps all over his body and a chill run down his spine. After a while, they finally saw something other than stone ahead, a huge snakeskin. Harry immediately closed his eyes, but Guan Qiong tapped his shoulder, prompting him to open them. "It's just the skin shed by a basilisk." Guan Qiong looked at the huge snakeskin in front of him. It was very bright and thick. When Guan Qiong knocked on it, the sound was very crisp. It was a good scale material. Chapter 186 Communication with Tom. Guan Qiong didn't waste much time on the snakeskin, merely glancing at it twice before continuing to lead Harry forward. The tunnel twisted and turned, until Guan Qiong couldn't quite remember where they were before a slight change of direction appeared ahead. There stood a solid wall, carved with two intertwined snakes, their eyes set with large, gleaming emeralds. Without Guan Qiong having to do anything, Harry knew what he had to do. He walked up to the wall and tried to recall his previous feelings. Open, hiss. On the second sound, Harry succeeded in speaking Parseltongue, and the two snakes separated. The stone wall began to crack in the middle, sliding to the sides and disappearing. Guan Qiong pulled Harry behind him and drank a potion from his pocket. It was the last of his supplies, but now was clearly no time to save. Watch your surroundings. Don't stray too far from me, Guan Qiong said, then walked inside. Harry nodded and cautiously walked inside. Inside was a long, dimly lit room. The pewter gray walls looked like they were cast from bronze, carved with entangled, coiled serpents that made Harry want to vomit. Meanwhile, in the center of the room, several massive stone pillars supported the entire space. These, too, were entwined with giant snakes, casting a cold, menacing gaze. Guan Qiong used her magical vision to scan the pillars, confirming that nothing was hidden behind them, before leading Harry forward. At the far end of the enormous room, Guan Qiong and Harry came upon a statue as tall as the room itself, clinging to the wall. The statue had an old, monkey-like snake and a sparse, long beard. It was the statue of Salazar Slytherin. At the foot of the statue, a figure waited for them, holding a diary. "Run!" Harry shouted, trying to charge, but was grabbed by Gwen. He looked from Ron in front of him to the giant statue and uttered a cry. "He's not Ron. He's been possessed," Gwen said. Ron looked up at Harry with a strange, fascinated look in his eyes and laughed. "Harry Potter, I'm so glad you're finally here, in my hands," Ron laughed exaggeratedly. He tossed the diary back, landing it next to the fallen Ginny, then pulled a wand from his pocket and pointed it at Harry. "Hollywood, phoenix feathers, 11 inches long, a perfect wand." Ron waved Harry's wand, a crackling sound in the air. The wand seemed to fit him perfectly. Gwen stood in front of Harry, putting one hand in his pocket, but not taking out the potion. "I think we need to have a chat, Tom," Gwen said, pointing her wand at Ron, her face wary. In his magical perspective, Ron was enveloped by a gray mist, lingering within his brain, controlling his actions. There was even a faint connection between the mist and the diary behind him, like Aladdin's lamp and its genie. "Oh, of course, of course. You brought Harry Potter here, so you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. I imagine you're already full of doubts." A gentle, friendly smile, one he never wore, appeared genuine, yet it felt false. Ron hated these pretenses. "How did you manage to control them without any trace of magic?" Guan Qiong asked Tom. This was the question that most puzzled him, and it was the one he had to answer. Otherwise, even if he killed Tom here, the rest of the school wouldn't be safe. "Oh, that," Ron's face lit up with a smug yet reserved smile, making one eager to hear what he had to say next. "It's a surprising discovery. When stray dogs see humans picking up rocks, they flee in panic. It's their natural reaction, and one day I discovered that humans also react this way." Ron gently flicked his wand like a band conductor. "When I draw my wand, they're all gripped by fear. Some even react with movements their bodies can't even register with their brains. It's a very useful tool. I use it to control my followers." Ron smiled proudly. "You tame humans like animals, through your methods," Guan Qiong said in a low voice. "It's a simple and easy thing. All you have to do is stimulate them with fear and pain in their dreams. They can only stop after repeating certain actions, and then they'll unconsciously do the same thing in real life." Tom smiled. His expression remained gentle, like a leader full of sunshine and hope, but his words chilled them to the bone. Guan Qiong's eyes dropped. The principle behind this wasn't difficult, but he and Dumbledore didn't have Tom's cold heart, so they couldn't think of it that way. In Tom's eyes, perhaps he alone was a uniquely superior human. Other muggles, even wizards, were inferior beings, no different from dogs. Such cruelty and indifference, wasn't it Voldemort? "Well, any more questions?" Tom asked with a smile, his tone brimming with confidence. He didn't mind showing a bit of sympathy for the two dying people. Guan Qiong remained silent, but Harry suddenly spoke up. What exactly are you? The ghost in the Chamber of Secrets. Harry had so many questions. Guan Qiong seemed to know a lot, but she hadn't shared it with anyone, leaving Harry feeling somewhat bewildered. Furthermore, the name Tom seemed familiar to Harry. Harry Potter, I didn't expect you to forget me so quickly. Or perhaps you've been placing too much trust in Dumbledore, Tom said with a smile. Dumbledore? Harry asked, confused. Suddenly, his eyes widened. You're Tom the Book Elf, Harry exclaimed. Tom's face paused, a look of disgust showing, but he still spoke with a sick smile. It seems you remember that we were best friends and told each other a lot, didn't we? But, Dumbledore. Harry opened his mouth wide. He lied to you all, it's obvious, isn't it? Tom said. Chapter 187 Trinity. Harry looked at Ron in front of him with disbelief, then turned to look at Guan Qiong, but Guan Qiong just looked at the statue and nodded. Dumbledore thought he had everything under control. I know him too well. He thought he had the situation under control and even thought of using me to improve your grades. I can only say that he is worthy of being the educator Dumbledore, Tom said maliciously. But it's a pity. Obviously, my plan is better. You deliberately exposed the flaws and were caught by Dumbledore and the others. What was your purpose? Guan Qiong suddenly spoke. Didn't you see it? I remember you were there, and you used some magical abilities. Tom looked at Guan Qiong and said. Guan Qiong did not avoid it, but looked back. However, unlike before, Tom's gray mist this time did not dissipate and flee under his magical perspective. Salazar, you're using the professor's power to deal with Salazar, Guan Qiong continued, remembering the events of the past. Salazar Slytherin's soul within the basilisk was stabbed to death by the shadow of Gryffindor, and Tom's soul then took advantage of the opportunity to enter. Yes, Tom said with a proud expression. What does this have to do with Salazar? Harry asked Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong was silent for a moment, then said, 1,000 years ago, Salazar left his soul in the castle. During your last test, Dumbledore and the other professors fought against Salazar's soul. Could that be? Harry looked at Ron before him. Could it be that Salazar's soul was in Ron's body? No, it's not. It's someone else's soul. Guan Qiong waved his wand, riding Tom Riddle in the air, then scrambled the words to form a new line. I am Voldemort. Harry stared at Ron with wide eyes. He couldn't believe he would face Voldemort for the second time, right in his second year at Hogwarts. This is a very ancient and dark magic. It rips a person's soul apart and places it on other objects, creating a Horcrux, thus ensuring their immortality. What you see before you is the first Horcrux created by Voldemort, containing his memories of when he was 16, Guan Qiong explained. But this, Harry felt his brain was struggling to process. He had just been talking about Salazar from 1,000 years ago, and now it was Voldemort's turn. Moreover, he had revealed so many secrets before, and Tom, whom he considered a close friend, was actually Voldemort's soul. But why did he end up in our notebook? Harry asked doubtfully. Guan Qiong looked at Tom, waiting for his explanation. He had some guesses about this matter, but he didn't have a definite answer. Tom raised his hand smugly, and the diary flew into his hands. He boasted, "This is a long time ago, Harry Potter. Please use your brain and think about it. If you had split off a piece of your soul in this school, where would you have placed it?" Harry looked at the diary in Tom's hand. It was obvious that Tom had placed his soul in the diary, but according to him, he clearly had a better choice. But what would it be? A mural? A broom? A statue? A desk or chair? Harry thought about the things in the school until he finally came up with the most unlikely possibility. His face turned panic. He looked at Tom in front of him, and through him, he saw the statue behind him. The statue existed in the room, and the room existed in Hogwarts Castle. It's the castle. You wanted to place the soul throughout the castle, so that the Horcrux would exist forever and be difficult to destroy, Harry said loudly. Very clever, Tom said smugly, looking around at everything, a hint of regret on his face. Correct, Tom nodded. But unfortunately, I failed. It's not just because too many soul fragments are needed to fill the entire castle, but also because a soul already exists within the castle. Tom looked at the statue behind him and spoke the name. Salazar Slytherin. Harry felt as if something had gripped his gut tightly, and a burning sensation erupted from his body. His mouth felt dry, and his head was dizzy, horrified by this shocking revelation. Could it be that they had been attending classes and living inside Salazar Slytherin's belly all this time, with everything under his watchful eye? Don't worry, Harry Potter, Tom smiled as he looked at Harry's pallor. Even Salazar didn't have a soul so vast that he could transform the entire castle into his Horcrux. His soul fragment fell into deep slumber the moment it entered the castle. Later, the other three founders discovered his intentions and sealed the place, but Salazar also left a backup plan to awaken himself. Guan Qiong suddenly spoke. Yes, you're very clever, Tom laughed. He created another Horcrux, the basilisk, and placed it in the Chamber of Secrets to awaken consciousness within the castle. He intended for it to awaken later and take control of the entire castle, completing an unprecedented resurrection. You foiled his plan, but you also had your own plans. Guan Qiong looked at Tom, or rather, at Tom's soul fragment. Of course, Tom looked at the two before him. Then, he turned and addressed the statue behind him. Speak to me, Slytherin, the greatest of the Hogwarts Four. He spoke in Parseltongue, and Harry understood what he meant, while Guan Qiong guessed what he meant. The next moment, Slytherin's massive statue seemed to come alive. At least, Harry saw Slytherin's eyes blink, but when he looked back, nothing had happened. The Slytherin statue's mouth opened wide, revealing a huge cavity. From the center emerged a hideous, scaly head, gazing down at Guan Qiong and Harry. On the head of the basilisk, there is a bust of Tom, inserted on the top of the basilisk's head, looking at Guan Qiong and Harry below with cold and ruthless eyes. Ron below opened his hands. At this moment, they seemed to have become a trinity. Tom's soul below was attached to his diary, maintaining his humanity, thus affecting the main soul of the basilisk. And he used the main soul of the basilisk to influence the souls of Slytherin in the entire Hogwarts castle, trying to devour or expel him. The predecessor of the basilisk was Salazar Slytherin's Horcrux, which allowed Tom to take advantage of the opportunity to enter. I have recovered, and will try to update. I will notify you if I stop updating. I will try to avoid it. Chapter 188, Sekiro Noto Sword Saint. Guan Qiong's eyes gleamed as he gazed at the basilisk emerging from the Slytherin statue's mouth and Tom above it. Upon arriving, he had noticed a vast grey mist within the statue, mingling with the basilisk's life circuits. The mist was identical to the mist within Ron's body below, but far purer and more powerful. The grey mist constantly assaulted the statue's black mist, sometimes devouring it, sometimes being dispersed by it, making it difficult to distinguish between the two. Guan Qiong could have taken action at that moment, but he chose not to. Instead, he posed a question to Tom. If he took action, the devouring process within the mist would be affected by him, accelerating it infinitely. He could then face Tom completely devouring Slytherin's soul, or even reviving Slytherin after devouring it. Tom also cooperated fully in answering Guan Qiong's questions, controlling his own soul to separate from Slytherin's. Just a quick move to dispatch two ants. This was Tom's thinking. He was facing only two second-year wizards, and he was completely confident. Even if one of them was the savior who had dealt with his true form, and the other was rumored to be the heir to Dumbledore's throne, becoming the greatest and most powerful wizard alive. They were still young, weren't they? Well, the time for answers is over now. It's time for you to experience fear. Tom remained polite, but his eyes were clearly filled with a frenzy and excitement that completely belied his appearance. Like a wolf that had smelled blood. John, Harry swallowed, looking at the basilisk in midair, then at Tom on the ground, feeling somewhat bewildered. He had a fighting spirit and was not afraid of death, but without even a wand, he didn't know how to fight. He couldn't possibly use his fists, he couldn't even defeat Dudley. Take this, you deal with Ron, and I'll deal with the basilisk, said Guan Qiong. He removed a bracelet from his left wrist, enchanted it, and cast several spells. The bracelet quickly transformed into the shape of an ancient knight's longsword. A cool aura emanated from the blade, making the very sight of it send sweat down one's back. Well, be careful. I'll help you as soon as possible, Harry said nervously, sword in hand. He didn't see the problem. Compared to the basilisk Guan Qiong was facing, Ron was clearly having it easier. Guan Qiong simply smiled and said nothing. He gave Harry a firm push on the shoulder and launched himself backwards. The mid-air basilisk shot out of the Slytherin statue at breakneck speed, its crimson maw opening as it bit Guan Qiong. However, Guan Qiong's body, like a fluttering willow catkin, spun around, dodging the attack. Of course, the massive movement of the basilisk still shook the air around him, causing him to feel a tremendous pressure, as if a hand were gripping his heart. Watching Guan Qiong flitting back and forth in midair, Harry swallowed again, then raised his knight's sword with all his might, aiming it at Tom. Tom looked at Harry with a hint of disdain. "Do all your Gryffindors love swordplay so much?" He extended his hand and swung his wand. A blinding beam of light flashed from the tip of his wand like lightning, shooting straight at Harry. "No, I must dodge." Harry gripped his sword tightly with both hands, a thought flashing through his mind as his body instinctively moved. A seeker for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, he had always been quick and agile, but as a wizard, he had never dodged with a sword before, which made his body feel a little out of balance and slowed him down considerably. At that moment, a brilliant white light flashed from the Sword of Nottin, and a magical circuit emerged from it, instantly enveloping Harry's entire body and controlling his movements. Before Harry could react, his body, with unprecedented speed, bent his left leg, rolled sideways, and landed on his shoulder, using his waist to generate power in a perfect dodge. What was this? Harry stared at the sword in his hand in amazement as he dodged the beam of light straight away, landing nearby. The movement just now was definitely not his own. In that instant, he felt as if something had taken over his body, and everything became smooth and fluid. Tom also looked at the sword in Harry's hand, a flicker of confusion crossing his face, but then a contemptuous smile appeared on his face. A little trick, although he didn't know what magic Guan Qiong had cast on the sword, it was ultimately just a trick, useless in the face of power. Tom waved Harry's wand, and beams of light shot out in various forms, hurtling towards Harry. Harry, with his excellent reflexes, reacted in advance. He also discovered that with the slightest reaction from his body, that strange sense of being taken over would appear, completing the next movement for him. In other words, as long as he reacted quickly enough, he could precisely dodge the attack. This was not too difficult for him, the Gryffindor team's seeker. However, Tom's attack was very skillful. After noticing Harry's agility, his beams began to coordinate with each other, setting a sequence and blocking Harry's escape route. This technique was incredibly effective. After dodging several initial beams, Harry faced a challenge. Beams were constantly bombarding him from every direction he dodged, left, right, forward, and backward. With his speed, even with that mysterious mastery, he couldn't dodge them. It was no use. Harry gritted his teeth. This time, instead of dodging, he raised his sword, preparing to forcibly block the next attack. But at that moment, the sword glowed again, and a surge of magical energy took over Harry's body. Harry's movements became practiced, as if he had parried 1,000 times. He held the sword at a 45-degree angle to his chest, bent his waist and bent backward, exerting force with his legs to absorb the impact. Tom's attack collided directly with his sword, creating a sharp sound, and a look of discomfort crossed Harry's face. But after the light faded, Harry stood steady, his breathing becoming more rapid, and he was fine except for a slight increase in breathing. Chapter 189 Guan Qiong fights the snake monster. Guan Qiong, mid-air, saw Harry masterfully wielding the Nottin sword below, and he felt relieved. Of course, he couldn't just throw down a sword and let Harry fight Tom. Even if it was just a weak soul fragment, it was still too much for a second-year wizard like Harry to deal with, especially since he had no prior training. In fact, even Guan Qiong hadn't trained in swordsmanship yet. He was always short of time, and he didn't see any promising prospects. Was it that magic wasn't working, or that guns were no longer powerful? But lack of training didn't mean he couldn't use magic to improve it. The Nottin sword in Harry's hand was a product of this. Guan Qiong had incorporated 3 magic circuits into it, representing 3 perfectly standard swordsmanship moves. As long as Harry could find the right timing, using it against Tom wouldn't be too difficult. After all, Tom's primary strength lay within the basilisk, while Ron's was just a soul fragment. Compared to that, Guan Qiong's situation was much more complex. Guan Qiong narrowly avoided another attack from the basilisk. He formed a fireball with his hand and threw it at the monster's eyes. At the same time, he pulled out a potion from his pocket and downed it in one gulp. A cool sensation flowed from Guan Qiong's mouth to his stomach, then transformed into a warm current that spread throughout his body. From this heat, different forces began to emerge. Some formed an adaptive magical skeleton, changing his physical state, while some provided a powerful life force. Harmonized by the herbs Guan Qiong had added, this life force had adapted to his body, allowing Guan Qiong to absorb it without much impact. Guan Qiong's hair grew at an astonishing rate. The silver light in his eyes shot forward like a substance. Infinite power began to emerge from his bloodline, shaking the surrounding space as magic. The magical tide rushed out at an astonishing speed, even the Slytherin statue was shaken by the impact. Feeling the immense, deep power within him, like the abyss of the ocean, Guan Qiong let out a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, the basilisk had already shattered the fireball Guan Qiong had just launched and was charging towards him. In previous attacks, Guan Qiong had either dodged or used magic to block its attacks, never engaging it head-on. After all, the basilisk was a formidable creature for even the Aurors, not to mention it now possessed Tom's power and soul. But now, Guan Qiong had mastered boundless power. Infused with the power of the future, he possessed the strength to confront the basilisk head-on. He folded his arms across his shoulders, curling up, ready to face the basilisk's bite, as if he were about to sink directly into its throat. But the next moment, an immense, scorching flame gushed from Guan Qiong's body. The ring on his left hand shone brilliantly, like the sun in the night sky. The immense magical power ignited a flame that formed a ring of solid flame crystals around him, within which flowed a river of flame. Guan Qiong's body shot out of the flame crystals like a catapult, rapidly streaking backward. He left the flame star where it lay, awaiting the approaching basilisk. Tom's soul within the basilisk sensed something was amiss and attempted to stop it, but the basilisk's massive size, half wrapped around the stone pillar, and with the other half ricocheting towards Guan Qiong, prevented it from changing its position quickly. The flame star landed in the basilisk's mouth, instantly erupting in a torrent of flames. Even with its immense strength, the basilisk let out a painful wail from the force and damage, and blood gushed from its mouth. The blood extinguished the flames, but it also evaporated, transforming into a red vapor that flew from the basilisk's mouth and drifted towards the sky above the room. But at that moment, Tom within the basilisk stretched out his hands, as if praying. Then, a black light descended from the ceiling and entered the basilisk's body, healing its wounds and revitalizing its aura. Guan Qiong observed this scene, her gaze flickering subtly towards the Slytherin statue in the room. Slytherin's power, yes, while Tom hadn't devoured Slytherin, he'd certainly studied it. Furthermore, the Slytherin spirit within the castle had been dormant, even affecting the basilisk's soul fragments, giving Tom ample opportunity to influence Slytherin. His previous disappearances after entering the school, as well as his ability to influence students by entering their notebooks, must have been due to the use of Hogwarts Castle, or Slytherin's power. This clearly demonstrates that he had studied this subject extensively during his time at school. Fortunately, Tom didn't dare to use Slytherin's power too recklessly, as his goal was to devour Slytherin's soul. This prevented Guan Qiong from having to deal with the souls of two powerful dark wizards. After Tom used Slytherin's power to heal the basilisk, its body was coated in a layer of black energy. This power possessed a strong resistance to magical power, and combined with the basilisk's protective scales, it was immune to many spells. The basilisk attacked Guan Qiong again. Having been wounded, its ferocious nature was rekindled, boosting its speed considerably, a relentless fight. Guan Qiong's body drifted like a falling leaf, dodging the basilisk's next attack. At the same time, countless tiny points of light began to fly from his hands, gradually filling the entire space. It's been a while since I've used this move, Guan Qiong thought. After the basilisk's next attack, he flew directly above it and suddenly spread his hands apart. The countless points of light, imbued with Guan Qiong's immense magical power, shone like the sun. The blinding light bathed the entire room, as if countless suns were focused upon it. The basilisk couldn't help but close its eyes, as no matter how it turned its head, a blinding light shone upon its eyes. At that moment, Guan Qiong clasped his hands together, as if to capture the basilisk. At that moment, countless points of light burst into flames from within. Guan Qiong's magical circuits were altered, and the infinitely elongated threads twisted into a solidified crown. From this, dancing water plants and steaming clouds emerged. Then, the steaming clouds merged with another steaming cloud, transforming into dancing water plants and a solidified crown. The flame spell, like a freezing spell, began to compress the flames toward the center, until they became a true fireball. Then, countless fireballs plummeted towards the basilisk in the center, like meteorites falling from the sky. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190 Power Conversion. A resounding explosion echoed throughout the room, sending clouds of dust raining down from above. Heat waves radiated from the center of the room, seemingly scorching the surroundings. Harry and Tom were also affected, forced to pause and steady themselves. Harry had already mastered the use of the knot and sword, his timing for attack, defense, and evasion becoming increasingly precise. He was already closing in on Tom. However, Guan Qiong's movements were too loud, and the resulting heat wave nearly blew them away, forcing Harry and Tom to pause. Guan Qiong floated in midair, staring intently at the explosion before him, waiting for the scorching light and smoke to dissipate. This was arguably his most damaging magical attack yet. His use of fire spells had reached unprecedented levels. Combined with his vast magical power supply, even he wouldn't be able to unleash a second such attack in a short period of time. However, Guan Qiong's brow furrowed as he stared ahead. The flames and smoke gradually dissipated, followed by a roar of pain and rage. A massive, hideous head emerged, lunging at Guan Qiong. It was a basilisk, its luster dimmed as never before. Slytherin's previous power protection had completely vanished. Its body was covered in wounds, and dark red blood continued to flow. It looked utterly miserable. Yet, it survived, relying on the basilisk's strength and scales, along with Slytherin's previous protection, to avoid being shattered by Guan Qiong. What a tricky situation, Guan Qiong thought as he flew away, dodging the attack. His magical power had been drained significantly, requiring him to recover before continuing to deal with the basilisk. Fortunately, he had prepared thoroughly before coming here, with more than one plan in mind, so he remained calm. Guan Qiong gently waved his wand, and a silver light emerged from it, radiating onto his body, merging his aura with the surroundings. Existence dispelling charm. In front of the basilisk, Guan Qiong seemed to have vanished. Even with its fangs, it couldn't sense Guan Qiong's location. This infuriated the basilisk, making it increasingly frantic and aggressive. Its movements grew more and more powerful, dancing wildly as if it were about to destroy the entire room. Guan Qiong would occasionally reappear, firing fireballs to draw the basilisk's attention and further agitate it. The moment he regained his magic power, it would be time to completely destroy the basilisk. Meanwhile, Harry charged towards Tom again. He had almost reached Tom, but the explosion had widened the distance between them, forcing Harry to start over. However, for Harry, a master of the knot and sword, this wasn't too difficult. With precise reflexes, he could use his parries and dodges to render Tom's attacks ineffective. He could also use this opportunity to close the gap between them. What a disgusting bug, Tom's face was filled with disgust. He stared at Harry charging towards him, completely helpless. Some powerful spells were simply too much for his soul's strength to cast, otherwise he would have already cast the 3 unforgivable curses. But Harry before him was too much of a nuisance. If he really waited for him to get close, he would be completely helpless. And in midair, Guan Qiong, had somehow managed to acquire such immense power, and her mastery of magic had reached such a level of perfection that she could even take on a basilisk blessed by Slytherin. This was incomprehensible and unacceptable to him. Guan Qiong had concealed herself, avoiding direct confrontation with the basilisk, only occasionally casting spells to draw its aggression and keep it away from Harry and Tom. Tom saw Guan Qiong's intention, knowing that he was trying to recover his magical strength before delivering a fatal blow to the basilisk. By then, his plan would have completely failed. This was something Tom could not accept. "You forced me to do this," Tom said sinisterly. He first fired several beams at Harry, then, as Harry dodged, he spread his arms and roared. This also meant abandoning the progress he'd made in undermining Slytherin over the previous months. He'd have to start over. But Tom couldn't care less now. If Guan Qiong truly slew the basilisk, everything he'd achieved would be completely lost. A powerful force emerged from Ron's body, causing a contorted expression on his face. This wasn't just a body without a master, Tom's powerful soul was causing immense pressure and pain. Tom's face was filled with disgust, as this also affected his own spiritual power. His soul emerged directly from Ron's body, and with a gentle wave of his wand, he flung Ron back like trash. By this point, Tom's body had become nearly material. He absorbed the student's life force, while also consuming a significant amount of Slytherin's strength, providing him with a significant boost. "Harry Potter, what can you do now?" Tom smirked, then extended his wand and pointed it at Harry. Expelliarmus, a blinding beam of light shot out, striking Harry with such speed that he couldn't react, let alone dodge or block. Then, an explosion occurred between him and the sword, forcing him to loosen his grip on the sword. Magic swept over the sword, sending it flying towards Tom, who caught it. "Now, let's see what you can do, Harry Potter," Tom said heavily, a sinister and excited expression on his face. Chapter 191, Rebirth of Jormungandr. Guan Qiong was also in trouble. The halfling within the basilisk had been replaced by a Slytherin, rendering his presence eliminating charm completely ineffective. Meanwhile, Slytherin's immense power was healing the basilisk's wounds and strengthening its various abilities. Guan Qiong's fireballs, which had previously been effective, were now ineffective. This was truly troublesome. Guan Qiong conjured a massive ice wall, blocking one of the basilisk's attacks while rapidly retreating. He knew that dealing with Tom wouldn't be easy, nothing would go his way, but fortunately, he wasn't unprepared. "Dobby," Guan Qiong called out, and with a crackling sound, the house elf Dobby appeared beside Guan Qiong. "Dobby at your service, Mr. Guan Qiong, how can I help you?" Dobby said respectfully, but he immediately sensed the surroundings and his face turned panicked. "Use that spell to connect to the location of the acromantula in the Forbidden Forest. I will provide you with magical power." "Yes, sir," Dobby nodded, then extended two slender fingers and danced them. A dark cave appeared behind him. At the same time, Guan Qiong placed a hand on Dobby's shoulder, infusing him with a tremendous amount of magical power. Due to the magical perspective, Guan Qiong tried not to harm Dobby with her magic, but it still had some effect on Dobby, causing his face to turn pale. However, Dobby's eyes were brighter than ever before. He whispered, "Mr. Guan Qiong, Dobby, can Dobby really be free?" "Of course, I promise it in the name of Harry Potter." "No, Dobby. Dobby believes in Mr. Guan Qiong. Mr. Guan Qiong will become the greatest wizard in the world and the successor to Dumbledore," Dobby said excitedly, and the magical power connected to the acromantula's nest in the Forbidden Forest. Aragog sensed a distinct aura within the lair. Gently rubbing its claws, it barked its leader's command to the surrounding acromantulas. "Go, children, fight. Kill the basilisk." Countless acromantulas clattered into the shadows before them, being teleported into the Chamber of Secrets. As they entered, they sensed an overwhelmingly terrifying aura, the pressure of their natural enemy, and the basilisk's power tinged with Slytherin. Yet, they charged fearlessly, fearless because they were all Aragog's children, and for Aragog's rebirth, they were willing to sacrifice everything. "What's wrong with this basilisk? The power it possesses is definitely not that of a normal basilisk." Aragog, the last to emerge from the portal, angrily questioned Guan Qiong. Though blind, its perception was heightened. The basilisk's aura was far more terrifying than that of its natural enemies. It was more than they could handle. Meanwhile, several acromantulas were already being devoured and sacrificed by the basilisk. "Things have changed, but it's still within my plan," Guan Qiong replied calmly. He extended his left hand, and the stoneman's heart ring shone with a dazzling light. Magic began to surge frantically into the ring. For the first time, the stoneman's heart's life force was controlled by Guan Qiong, twisting into a brand new pattern. It was the pattern of the basilisk's life circuit that Guan Qiong had just observed. Furthermore, because the stoneman's heart absorbed a vast ocean of flames during its repair, the life circuit was twisted into a magical circuit pattern of a fire spell, just like Lockhart's life circuit. "Snake that burns the world. Serpent that devours the world, Jormungandr, wake up." Guan Qiong's eyes shone with a silver light like the bright moon, and he uttered a voice unconsciously, like some magical incantation, or the words of an ancient god. As the words fell, the ring on Guan Qiong's left finger began to twist, circling around his finger twice, and then raised a delicate head. It was a head identical to the basilisk's, with eyes as beautiful as red agate. With the first flick of its tongue, Jormungandr's entire body transformed into crimson flames, blazing continuously in Guan Qiong's hand. Guan Qiong placed Jormungandr on the ground and pointed his wand. A swelling spell erupted from the wand, landing on Jormungandr's body. Its adaptive magical skeleton filled its core, a circuit of life and magic, causing it to grow against the wind. In a matter of breaths, Jormungandr's body grew to the size of the basilisk, its tongue bared, and it roared provocatively at the basilisk attacking the acromantula. The basilisk responded with an angry roar, ignoring the surrounding acromantula and charging directly at Jormungandr. The two giant pythons collided fiercely, then locked in a fierce tangle, biting each other's scales. Compared to the basilisk's dark gray-green scales and yellow pupils, Jörmungandr, with his crimson scales, a body brimming with flames, and eyes like red agate, was undoubtedly a distinct entity. However, Jörmungandr's power was no less than that of the basilisk. Composed purely of fire, his body was equally as strong, and he constantly radiated an astonishingly intense heat. The basilisk, momentarily unaware, suffered a significant loss. After biting through Jörmungandr's scales, he burned his mouth and tongue. However, the basilisk's Slytherin power suppressed Jörmungandr, protecting him from further damage, creating a tangled bond between the two. However, the basilisk faced more than just Jörmungandr. Although Guan Qiong was unable to cast spells due to the need to fully channel his magical energy, the Acromanchulas led by Allegor remained on the battlefield. I saw them crawling towards the two giant snakes that were constantly rolling without fear of death, like ants, biting the scales and flesh of the basilisk. Even if their lives were only exchanged for a wound, it was a very profitable thing for them who had already fallen into madness. Even Aragog, who was next to Guan Qiong, made a fierce clicking sound, and his body trembled slightly, as if he was about to join the battle. The outcome of the battle is already doomed. Guan Qiong stared closely at the battle between the two giant snakes. With so much preparation on his part, even the soul of Slytherin would end up in failure and dissipation. Fu Yang took the medicine and had a good sleep, which was much easier than the first time. No need to worry about interruptions. Did I write about the battle a little watery? It feels like I write many chapters when it comes to the battle, a habit left over from the previous book. Chapter 192 Gryffindor Blessing. While Guan Qiong was suppressing the basilisk and fighting the Slytherin soul, Harry was in trouble. Tom's soul had snatched the sword Guan Qiong had given him, leaving him no chance to fight. So, the renowned Harry Potter, the savior of the world, will die here today. Tom, his face ablaze with excitement, approached Harry, his nightsword in hand. Just as he was about to raise his sword to deliver the fatal blow, a resounding cry echoed throughout the Chamber of Secrets. The cry echoed throughout the room, and then a crimson figure soared from the air, circling the two giant snakes twice before flying towards Harry. It was Fawkes. Harry recognized it. It was the phoenix he had seen in the headmaster's office. Phoenix, Tom was startled. Fawkes had already flown in front of Harry, emitting a piercing cry. The cry shook Tom's soul, causing it to ripple like sails in the wind. Damn Phoenix! Tom waved his wand, and a flash of light appeared, flying towards Fawkes, forcing him to fly away. But Fawkes also left behind what he had brought. The sorting hat. Hey, dear little fellow, I think you're in a bit of trouble. Why don't you try me on? Perhaps I can help, the hat said, its mouth cracking. With no other options left, Harry obeyed and put the hat on. This time, unlike the first year, Harry felt the hat shrink around his head, tightening and causing him pain. At the same time, something extremely hard seemed to fall from the hat and hit him on the head. Ouch! Harry cried out, pulling the hat off and seeing what was inside. It was a gleaming silver sword, its hilt set with a dazzling, excised ruby. Oh, it's the sword of Gryffindor. Take it now, and you will receive the favor and protection of Gryffindor, the hat warned Harry. Harry took up the sword, and a magical force emerged from above, descending upon him. In a trance, he seemed to see a figure descend and merge with him. He felt a surge of strength, and the muscle aches from wielding the knot vanished. It was as if someone was behind him, holding his hand and instructing him on how to wield the sword. Gryffindor, Tom exclaimed, realizing what was happening. A faint glow shone from Harry, as if armor were emerging, though not clearly visible. Damn it, Tom roared, waving his wand repeatedly at Harry, but each shot was slashed away by Harry's sword. Harry, meanwhile, rushed towards Tom at breakneck speed. Tom couldn't help but step back. Even he felt a little panicked by the Gryffindor's power. But Harry's speed was too great. He was a completely different person from when he had wielded the Knotten. His agility was unbelievable for a 12-year-old wizard. In just a few moments, Harry caught up with Tom, raising the sword of Gryffindor high and slashing down. Tom raised the sword of Knotten to block, but it was no use. The sword of Gryffindor sliced through the sword and Tom like water, slicing them in two. Tom cried out in pain and turned into smoke, flying towards the diary. Harry chased after him, slashing at him several times, breaking the smoke into pieces. Finally, as Tom was about to escape into his diary, Harry, holding the sword of Gryffindor in reverse, plunged down hard. The diary was pierced right through, and the magical circuits within began to shatter under the impact of Gryffindor's power. Harry then lifted the diary with his sword and performed a delicate dance, slicing it into irreparable fragments, completely destroying the Horcrux. No. As the Horcrux was destroyed, Tom's soul emerged from it, transformed into a giant human face, and rushed towards Harry, but in mid-air, it disappeared completely like a gust of sand. Wonderful. Harry cheered inwardly at the sight before him, and at the same moment, he felt the power descending upon him fading. Wait a moment, Harry shouted, then hurried over to the broken sword. This is June's sword, but it's broken, Harry said, looking up as he held the two halves of the sword. He wasn't sure if the descending power could understand him, or if it would help him, but Harry had to do it. This sword was given to him by June, and he didn't want to return it broken. The Gryffindor power faltered for a moment, but Harry could sense its gentle kindness. Then, feeling it control his hand, he lifted the sword of Gryffindor and pointed it at the sword. A faint, mysterious magical incantation echoed, and light emerged from the sword of Gryffindor, falling onto the sword, connecting it. With a flicker of light, the sword returned to its original form, indistinguishable from its previous state. After this, the Gryffindor power vanished, leaving only Harry, the Sorting Hat, and the sword of Gryffindor. Guan Qiong watched the battle unfold before him. He had noticed Fawkes the Phoenix's arrival, but he was now completely focused on the battle between Jormungandr and the Basilisk, not allowing himself to be distracted. As for Harry, he had already sensed the arrival of Gryffindor's power, so he naturally had nothing to worry about. The Basilisk had already been ripped of flesh by Jormungandr, which was being devoured by the Acromantulas, significantly increasing their power. As for the wounds on Jormungandr's body, as it was a manifestation of flame, as long as the innermost core of the Stoneman heart was not damaged and Guan Qiong's magical power remained constant, it was immortal. The flesh-bitten would also turn to flames and rapidly grow back. Then, Fawkes the Phoenix flew over again, piercing the Slytherin's soul within the Basilisk with swift speed. Although it only pierced through, it still dimmed the Slytherin's soul. Of course, the flames burning within Fawkes were also slightly affected, but the problem was not serious. Under the combined attack of Jormungandr, Fawkes, and the Acromantula, the Basilisk could no longer stir. It could only roar in anger and impotence before being pinned to the ground, where it was attacked and torn apart by the creatures. Slytherin could only use his strength to protect the Basilisk's brain and heart, keeping it alive. It's time to end this, Guan Qiong said softly. Chapter 193 End. Guan Qiong soared into the air, flying towards the Basilisk, simultaneously withdrawing all his magical energy and channeling it into his right hand. Jormungandr, deprived of his magical power, began to transform, though it still took a moment before it completely vanished. This was enough. A fireball began to form in Guan Qiong's right hand. Under his control, it began to compress inward, condensing into a tiny dot under a freezing spell. As the magic power continued to flow, the aura of the dot grew stronger and brighter. The Basilisk, sensing its demise, began to struggle and twist, but Jormungandr restrained it with his body, while the Acromantulas used their webs and their own bodies to control it. Guan Qiong arrived in front of the Basilisk and watched Slytherin hover above it. Even then, Slytherin remained motionless. Perhaps Millennial had left and reduced to mere instincts, devoid of his original consciousness. Could this kind of immortality still be considered immortality? Without a second thought, Guan Qiong flung the spark into the Basilisk's mouth and retreated at top speed. Jormungandr, also under his control, dissipated and flew back into Guan Qiong's grasp. The Acromantulas fled in all directions, sensing the deadly presence. The Phoenix chirped anxiously and flew toward Harry. The spark landed in the Basilisk's mouth and flew a short distance inside. After completely losing Guan Qiong's control, it began to expand. A fierce heat wave erupted from the Basilisk's mouth, followed by an endless stream of flames. The Basilisk roared in pain, but its roar was short-lived. A red glow began to appear below its head and neck, as if something was seeping out. Then, a violent explosion echoed, resounding like thunder throughout the room, sending rubble crashing down from the surrounding walls. Scales shattered from the center, scattering everywhere, stained with the scorching yellow of the flames. The Basilisk collapsed, now headless. Its entire head vanished under Guan Qiong's super-compressed flame spell. A bloody rain appeared, but the intense heat evaporated it, leaving a wisp of blood throughout the room. Looking at the Basilisk before her, Guan Qiong let out a long breath, her body relaxing a little. Aragog, as agreed, you may possess its heart, which will grant you a new life. However, you must promise to restrain yourself and your people and not harm any Hogwarts student, Guan Qiong said to Aragog, who bowed his head. I promise, Aragog said, clicking his fingers. Guan Qiong nodded and removed his socks. A silver light flashed in his eyes as he cast a spell on them. Then, using transfiguration, he transformed the nearby stone into a diary and placed his socks inside. Dobby, take this and give it to Lucius. The magic within will guarantee your freedom, Guan Qiong said to Dobby. Of course, before that, you must send him back, Dobby understands. Thank you, respected Mr. Guan Qiong. You will always be the one Dobby respects most. Dobby took the diary in his hands and held it to his chest. At the same time, a dark door appeared behind it. Guan Qiong imbued it with magic, teleporting it all the way to the location of the Acromantula's lair. Leave, Aragog, Guan Qiong said to Aragog, who was excitedly holding the heart extracted from the basilisk's body. A spider crawled into the wound and removed the heart for him. I understand. Thank you very much, Guan Qiong. Aragog bowed his head. If you need anything, please feel free to ask us. The Acromantulas will always be at your service. Remember to bring your bodies with you. Guan Qiong remained silent. Perhaps his current strength had made Aragog feel like submitting, but Guan Qiong had no intention of taming the group yet. It would be better to leave the task of raising a group of spiders to Hagrid. He didn't want to build a cave for himself. With the Acromantulas and Dobby gone, only Gwen, Harry, Ron, and Ginny remained in the chamber. Gwen approached Harry. Gwen, your sword. Harry handed the sword of Nottin to Gwen, who took it and examined it. He had just noticed what was happening here. To be honest, he'd felt a bit sorry when the sword of Nottin was severed, but he hadn't expected it to be repaired by Gryffindor. Furthermore, it seemed to have something else on it. Gwen looked at the sword of Nottin in her hand and flicked it, transforming it into a bracelet. Thank you, Harry. How are they? I don't know. They haven't woken up. I can't help you, Harry said. Gwen used her magical vision to see that the life circuits in Ginny and Ron's bodies had dimmed and weakened somewhat, but it wasn't fatal. She couldn't detect any other signs of magical damage. However, considering what Tom had said earlier, Gwen felt she couldn't be careless. She needed to report it to Dumbledore and get some psychological testing done. Get ready to leave. We need to find the professors and have them handle this. Guan Qiong snapped his fingers, causing Ron and Ginny to float, then led Harry outside. Qiong, how do you look? Harry reminded him. Guan Qiong still looked like his adult self, and while he was much more handsome than before, Harry found it odd. Of course, he knew it was the effects of the potion Guan Qiong had consumed. The previous time Guan Qiong had been hospitalized, it was said to be due to the potion he had researched and consumed. Oh, the potion's effects will last a while. Guan Qiong touched his face and walked outside, with Harry following behind him. With the dissipation of the Slytherin spirit, the Chamber of Secrets seemed to lose its vitality and truly connect with Hogwarts Castle. At least, Guan Qiong could see traces of magic on the castle through the walls, unlike before, when it felt like a separate space. The basilisk's corpse lay in the center of the chamber, like a huge, broken statue. Fawkes danced on it, occasionally biting off a piece of flesh and swallowing it as his own rations. The flesh of the basilisk can make it grow faster. Guan Qiong had read such an introduction in a book. When Guan Qiong and Harry were about to leave, Fawkes flew over and jumped onto Guan Qiong's shoulder, rubbed his face affectionately, and then looked at the ring in his hand curiously. No need to follow, Fawkes, we know the way. You can eat more. You consumed a lot just now, Guan Qiong said to Fawkes. Fawkes was reborn just this school year and was still in his infancy. It took a lot of his strength to come and help deal with the basilisk. Fawkes made a crisp cry and flew back, continuing to pick the meat from the basilisk to eat. Chapter 194, Excited Lockhart. Gwen led Harry, the still unconscious Ron and Ginny out of the room and into the tunnel, preparing to retrace their steps. Harry clutched the sword of Gryffindor in one hand and the sorting hat in the other, his wand tucked away in his pocket. It was all over, Harry thought. Everything was over. The basilisk and Voldemort's spirit, Tom, were dead. Everything was over. He relaxed. But just as they entered the tunnel and returned to the spot where the basilisk had shed its skin, something unexpected happened. The walls and ground around them suddenly exploded, and vines shot out from the center, attacking Harry and Gwen. Harry hurriedly used the sword of Gryffindor to cut through a few, but the vines seemed endless. Soon, they had entangled him, suspending him, and the sword in the sorting hat fell. "What's going on?" Harry cried out in shock, looking at Gwen. But Guan Qiong was also suspended, his hands and feet bound by vines, even his fingers, one by one, preventing him from moving. As for his wand, it had long since been knocked aside. How could it be possible? Harry couldn't believe that Guan Qiong had just faced such a powerful and terrifying basilisk and slew it, and now he was also captured. Guan Qiong, entangled in the air, moved his fingers, but found the vines were quite strong, so he stopped and relaxed. The vines were quite comfortable, loose and soft, a bit like a vine bed, but the angle would be a little more, about 45 degrees. "Ha, look who I found." Just as Harry was still wondering and Guan Qiong was paddling, a voice suddenly appeared in front of them, and a figure emerged from the basilisk scales. Wavy blonde hair, blue eyes, and a perfect smile that showed 8 teeth. "Professor Lockhart," Harry exclaimed, wondering why Lockhart was here. "Hello, dear Harry Potter, and dear Gwen, good afternoon." "Oh, no, it's evening now. You should be in the common room. How dare you wander off into such a dangerous place?" "I'll give you both a hard time," Lockhart said with a smile. "But Harry tried to explain, but Gwen spoke up. "You were following us, Professor Lockhart." "How much did you see?" Lockhart looked at Gwen, confirming that every finger was entangled in vines and unable to move. His smile widened. "Not much. I just saw an evil spirit named Tom, an ancient spirit named Salazar, and a basilisk harming the students." Lockhart pulled out a magic item shaped like an ear. "It's not very useful. I didn't hear much, but I never expected Hogwarts to hold so many secrets. I'm going to have another book in my adventures." For some reason, Lockhart felt his mind was incredibly sharp. He was thinking and speaking quickly. The ring on his hand and the pendant on his chest were flashing warning signals, but they had been lit like this since entering this place, and Lockhart didn't notice anything wrong. "You want to write a book? Like your stories? Write us in it?" Harry asked. "Of course, kid, I've already thought of the name. It's called A Year of Fighting the Basilisk." Lockhart smiled excitedly. "But you won't be in these stories?" Lockhart pointed at Harry. "And you?" He pointed at Guan Qiong. "There's only one protagonist in this story, the Great King of Adventure, Order of Merlin, 3rd class, Gilderoy Lockhart. That's me. Perhaps after this incident, I'll earn the 2nd class order. After all, I cracked the secrets of the Millennium Chamber of Secrets in Hogwarts Castle and dealt with the darkest and most dangerous dark wizard, Salazar, and the soul of you-know-who." Lockhart spoke with growing excitement, as if he had already imagined what the future would hold. His fame would soar to a new level, surrounded by countless spotlights and cameras. His photo would grace the front page of the Daily Prophet, a permanent fixture there. Everywhere would be proud to have him. His book sales would soar, and he'd have more money than he could ever spend in his lifetime. But it was Guan Qiong and I who dealt with the basilisk and Tom." "You weren't there at all. You didn't do anything?" Harry demanded. "Oh, my dear Harry, why do you think I tied you up here?" Lockhart looked at the two with amusement. "What?" Harry stared at Lockhart in disbelief. He'd thought it was some kind of trap in the chamber, but they'd been lucky enough not to trigger it when they first entered, so he hadn't even suspected Lockhart. Lockhart was a professor, after all. A professor attacking a student. This was too bizarre, and even kind-hearted Harry couldn't imagine it. "Yes, it was me. Did you think it was a trap in the chamber? You're so slow, Harry. As your defense against the dark arts professor, I have to teach you a lesson about being on guard. But it seems there's no point, because you'll forget everything here." "What are you going to do?" Harry panicked, as he saw Lockhart pull out his wand. "Don't worry, Harry. It's just a little magic. I'll erase all your memories of this place. I've done this many times, so it won't be a problem," Lockhart said. "Have you done this to anyone else?" Harry was shocked. "Of course, my dear child. You don't think I did all that, do you? The one who dealt with a werewolf was actually an old American wizard. God, he was so ugly. I still think so now that I think about it." Putting his picture on the cover of the daily newspaper would scare a child to tears. Lockhart became more and more outspoken, speaking out everything. As for the witch who exorcised the female ghost, she was also very ugly. To be honest, I even think I helped them, preventing them from being ridiculed by the whole world. Of course, I also received a small reward for their stories and experiences, so you took all the blame for other people's affairs. I can't believe that what you wrote in your book is actually false. It's not false. It really happened. I just tampered with it a little and changed the protagonist to me, the handsome Gilderoy. Of course, I also did a lot of things. I needed to follow them, ask them about the whole process, and then cast a memory charm on them, just like now. Fortunately, I saw everything you said, so I didn't have to waste too much time. Lockhart finished smiling and raised his wand, which glowed. Okay, kids, I've answered all the questions I should have answered, and I've heard all the secrets. I believe you should be satisfied. So, from now on, just forget this story. Oblivion. Lockhart waved his wand violently. Chapter 195 Blood for Blood, Tooth for Tooth. An extremely intense light emanated from Lockhart's wand and flew towards Harry. At a crucial moment, a dark shadow flew from Guan Qiong's hand, blocking Harry's path. It was Jormungandr, but now in its miniature form. Guan Qiong hadn't injected much magical energy into it. This meant that, despite being struck by Lockhart's spell, it was also propelled towards Harry, knocking him unconscious. At least that was the appearance. Guan Qiong's eyes gleamed silver as he turned his gaze from Harry to Lockhart. Professor Lockhart, aren't you wondering who told you about the Chamber of Secrets? Guan Qiong prompted. Lockhart looked at Guan Qiong, puzzled, and pulled out a slip of paper. It read, "The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is in Myrtle's bathroom." The slip had been slipped under his office door by someone unknown. He surmised that someone had discovered the entrance and had come to inform Hogwarts' most famous and powerful professor, asking him to solve the problem. This was a common occurrence. After becoming famous, he encountered many such incidents. But now Guan Qiong was asking this question. "It was you. You have placed this note under my office door, deliberately luring me here." Lockhart wasn't stupid. On the contrary, he was quite clever, and he figured it out instantly. "Of course, Professor Lockhart, I wanted to resolve this all at once. After all, if I put it off any longer, the holidays would be coming soon," Guan Qiong said. "Have you suspected me for a long time? Were you the one who sent me those things before?" "I guess so." "Hey, Guan Qiong, I know you're highly talented. Even Dumbledore praised you, and you used special potions to fight a basilisk and Salazar. But now, you've been ensnared. What can you do?" Lockhart panicked for a moment, but seeing Guan Qiong completely bound, he felt relieved. Especially since he had noticed Guan Qiong's silent and wandless spells earlier, he had deliberately controlled the vines to seal Guan Qiong's fingers, preventing him from moving. Now, Guan Qiong was just a fish to be slaughtered. "So confident, Professor Lockhart," Guan Qiong smiled, his eyes gleaming silver. Something floated from his pocket, a potion bottle, opened and bubbling. Another object was a tape recorder, also turned on and recording. Then, flames began to blaze around Guan Qiong. Without moving a muscle, he simply controlled his magic to form 3 layers of magical circuits, a solidified ground, dancing grass, and steaming clouds. Scorching flames erupted from his body, burning away the vines entwined around him. But he didn't fall. Instead, he hovered in the air. Guan Qiong took the tape recorder in his hand, channeling his magic power, controlling the circuit Mr. Weasley had added. The recording began to rewind, and when he had fully memorized the entire passage after "You didn't think I was responsible for everything that happened before, did you?" It was actually an old American wizard who dealt with the werewolves. He smiled with satisfaction. This was all his plan, of course. He'd planned to take out Lockhart as well, so he'd lured him here and already prepared Hermione's sensitizer and a recorder. Of course, Harry's role was crucial, too. Compared to his unproven talent, Harry's reputation as a savior had already garnered considerable acclaim. And since he was a phasic, Harry would be much more effective in guiding the questioning. "You're plotting against me." Lockhart, seeing this, and especially hearing his own words on the recorder, couldn't help but understand. He furiously extended his wand, aimed at Guan Qiong, and cast a spell. Obligate. The spell flew swiftly and accurately, hurtling towards Guan Qiong's head. Lockhart had already figured that if he could subdue Guan Qiong, he could undo everything. Quick reflexes, Professor Lockhart. While the sensitizer may have been a factor, I have to say you're quite skilled. Guan Qiong summoned his magic, and a massive snake rose from the ground, blocking the spell. It opened its crimson maw and roared at Lockhart. Jormungandr. Then, Jormungandr charged directly at Lockhart, his crimson scales sliding across the ground, stirring up intense heat and scorching heat. Damn it! Lockhart pulled a bottle from his robes and threw it at Jurmungandr. The bottle shattered, spilling its contents with a foul, pungent odor. But it was to no avail. Jurmungandr's flames consumed the liquid, evaporating it into nothingness. Lockhart produced another scroll-like object and tossed it at Jurmungandr. The scroll unfurled in midair, flashes of lightning flashing within, and then several powerful bolts of lightning struck Jurmungandr's head. But Jurmungandr merely shook his head and continued on his way. Lockhart continued to pull out other items, cursed powders, potions that made the ground muddy and difficult to walk on, and various offensive magical items. His collection was extensive, evidently a great deal of thought had gone into it. But these items had no effect on Jurmungandr, not even enough to stop him. Well, Professor Lockhart, are you feeling a sense of despair? Guan Qiong stood above Jurmungandr, looking down at Lockhart below. He deliberately slowed Jurmungandr's movements, only slightly slower than Lockhart's retreat. Hermione felt the same way when you pushed her forward to face the basilisk. I think you've deeply experienced it now. Guan Qiong's face lit up with satisfaction. Hermione had told him what had happened before, but he had remained motionless, wanting Lockhart to experience the same fear. Blood for blood, tooth for tooth, kindness for kindness, and justice for evil. This was his motto in life. Of course, Lockhart's misdeeds weren't limited to these, and Guan Qiong had no intention of letting him off the hook. As Lockhart reached the edge, where he could no longer retreat, Guan Qiong stopped Jurmungandr. Let me go, Guan Qiong. I will apologize to Granger and leave the school. Leave here. I can also give you money, lots of money, and anything else you want. I can even write a personal biography for you, praising your story of saving Hogwarts, Lockhart said nervously. He looked up at the red, ferocious head, which also looked at him with agate eyes, and his eyes were extremely cold. My dear Professor Lockhart, Guan Qiong had a smile on his face, which seemed very intimate, but the words he said made Lockhart feel like he fell into the abyss. Even if I get rid of you, these things will be mine too. Chapter 196 Ending. Lockhart tried to struggle again, pulling magical items from his robes, but Guan Qiong gave him a single look, and his body froze, all his magical items flying out. Under Guan Qiong's magical vision, the magical items couldn't be hidden, and they were all swept away. Among them were half a mask, magic scrolls, human figures, maps, and other items. Admittedly, Lockhart's own magical skills weren't particularly impressive, his only aptitude being the Obliviate charm, but he did have a considerable collection of magical items. You can't kill me, Guan Qiong. I'm a professor. The school won't allow you to do this. You'll be expelled. Lockhart had no choice but to continue using words to persuade Guan Qiong to give up. His eyes were filled with deep fear and despair, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Don't worry, Professor. I won't kill you. Guan Qiong waved her fingers gently, and Ron's wand flew out of his pocket and flew in front of Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong observed the wand before her from her magical perspective. Due to the damage caused by the opening of the school, the magic circuits within Ron's wand were broken in some places, while others were simply twisted and distorted. If magic passed through the broken areas during magic, the effect would change. If it was twisted, then Guan Qiong smiled and flew the wand in front of Lockhart. Using a puppet spell, she controlled Lockhart, forcing him to pick up Ron's wand. As for Lockhart's wand, Guan Qiong simply flew it aside and inserted it into the wall, pretending it had been lost in combat. Come, Professor, recite with me. Guan Qiong injected magic power into Lockhart's body, stimulating his vital circuits. Obligate, no. A dazzling flash of light appeared from Lockhart's wand, but instead of moving forward, it struck Lockhart backward. Lockhart's body was slammed against the wall and slowly fell. Guan Qiong could see a magic circuit entering his brain, stirring it like a drill. Guan Qiong erased Lockhart's memory of the moment he entered the Chamber of Secrets, making it easier for him to handle subsequent inquiries from Hogwarts and the Ministry of Magic. The evidence was already in hand, witnesses, Harry, and physical evidence, the recording. Lockhart could not escape the law, Azkaban awaited him. Of course, he couldn't kill Lockhart or render him a fool with a memory charm. That would be troublesome, and neither the school nor the ministry would allow it. He had said that before simply to give Lockhart a taste of fear. As for what happened next, he left it to the school. He trusted Dumbledore to handle it. After being struck by the memory charm, Lockhart fell to the ground, unconscious. Guan Qiong snapped his fingers, causing Lockhart's body to levitate and follow him. Guan Qiong collected the magic items, keeping a few with complex and interesting circuits and returning the others to Lockhart. None of those magic items could compare to his Jelmungandr, and they simply took up space. Guan Qiong walked back down the tunnel. Harry, Ron, and Ginny were also levitated by him. Like Lockhart, they followed him like ghosts. During this process, Guan Qiong's potion finally wore off, and his body returned to its original state. This left him mentally exhausted, and his magic power dwindled to its previous level, but he felt much better than before, no longer fainting after taking a few steps. He used the levitation spell to return himself and the others to the entrance through the passage they had previously descended. Then, playing Parseltongue on a recorder, he opened the entrance and finally made it back to the bathroom and back to the castle. It was already night, and Guan Qiong could see that the sky outside had fallen completely dark. Although Hogwarts was brightly lit, it was deserted. All the students were in their respective lounges. Only professors and ghosts moved around the castle. Perhaps they had finally noticed that 2 more students were missing, and the patrols throughout the school were much more intense than before. Guan Qiong hadn't yet decided whether to find Professor McGonagall or send them to the hospital first when he heard the sound of footsteps outside. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Professor McGonagall rushed into the bathroom for the first time. Her neatly sleeked bun was now a bit disheveled, and her expression was more furious than serious. Do you know how terrified and desperate I was when I heard that 2 more students had disappeared? Do you even know what time it is? Especially you, Guan Qiong? It's unbelievable. Where on earth have you been? Professor McGonagall asked, looking at the unconscious people on the ground, then at Guan Qiong, the only one awake. We went to the Chamber of Secrets, rescued them, and killed the basilisk. Guan Qiong pointed to the still opening hole behind them, then to the unconscious Ron and Ginny, where a light appeared. Professor McGonagall was stunned for a moment, as if trying to process what she had seen, then her face was filled with shock and disbelief. You killed the basilisk. As deputy headmistress of Hogwarts School, she knew a lot from Dumbledore, especially the legend of the basilisk. There were some documents in the school that recorded what might be in the Chamber of Secrets, so she knew how difficult it would be to kill the basilisk. A single basilisk wouldn't be a problem, and she could have dealt with it, but Slytherin had left behind a power, and that power resided within the basilisk. To deal with it, she would have to simultaneously deal with Slytherin's power, which was incredibly difficult. Furthermore, they were in the Chamber of Secrets, a place completely dominated by Slytherin. Yes, I used a potion, drawing on the power of the future. Guan Qiong let the bottle from her pocket float. This wasn't something to hide. All the professors knew about his creation of the potion, and some of the students knew about it as well. However, not many of them understood its power. After all, their abilities were limited primarily by their learning and use of spells. As for their magical powers as adults, their growth in power wasn't as dramatic as Guan Qiong's. Only Guan Qiong, due to her natural talent, saw exceptional results from the potion. At that moment, Snape arrived, the second person to arrive after Professor McGonagall. His complexion looked particularly grim, his once sallow complexion now pale, his thin lips tightly pursed, and his eyes seemed to hold back a volcano. Snape looked at Harry lying on the ground, then at Lockhart beside him, and said in a cold tone, "What's going on?" If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197 Epilogue. Professor Lockhart went in after us, and then he attacked us. Guan Qiong used a light spot to display a sentence. It was this sentence that made the temperature around Snape drop immediately. He then took out the tape recorder and played the conversation between Lockhart and Harry so that the 2 professors could hear it. As for him, as a person with aphasia, he was of course recording it on the side. In the end, I saved Harry and fought with Professor Lockhart again. After knocking his wand away, he picked up Ron's wand and tried to use magic, but because of the wand, the magic hit himself. Finally, Guan Qiong added a sentence with a light spot to end it. So that's how it is, Snape said coldly, his eyes fixed on Lockhart on the ground, as if he wanted to burn him through with his eyes. Professor McGonagall on the side also had a serious and angry expression. After all, It was too outrageous for a professor to attack a student. I can see you're exhausted, Guan Qiong. Go back and rest. We'll discuss the details after Dumbledore returns. I'll take them to the hospital for treatment. As for Lockhart's situation, we'll take care of it as well, said Professor McGonagall. At this point, some ghosts gathered around. Peeves looked at the people lying on the ground in surprise, shouting and yelling. A few more have fallen. A few more have fallen. This is really scary. However, he was immediately taught a lesson by the professors with magic. Guan Qiong nodded, and Professor McGonagall continued, "We'll go to the Chamber of Secrets and confirm the basilisk's death. You've brought honor to our Gryffindor. Although I don't advocate or want you to do this, it's happened and we have to accept it." A smile crossed Professor McGonagall's face. "Gryffindor gets 100 points for your bravery and fearlessness. Of course, for leaving without permission and acting recklessly, you and Mr. Potter will each be deducted 30 points. Okay, child, go back and rest now. Don't do that next time. If you really want to take a risk, remember to tell us first. That wouldn't be Gryffindor, Professor." Guan Qiong smiled, flashing a light as she left the bathroom and headed towards the dormitory. "He will achieve great things in the future," Snape said in the bathroom, looking at the hole wide enough for a person to enter. "Yes, he has great talent, and he's smart and kind. I can see that he did this because of Miss Granger." "He was angry about Miss Granger being attacked," Professor McGonagall said. "I just hope he doesn't drag the foolish Mr. Potter along next time, saving us the energy to clean up his body." "Doesn't he realize how weak he is?" Snape said, looking at the unconscious Harry with a look of dismay. "It's not stupidity, Professor Snape. Bravery isn't stupidity, it's loyalty and reliability, an important quality in a friend." After Guan Qiong returned to the Gryffindor common room, she was immediately surrounded by the Wheel Eyes, and everyone else's attention was drawn to the area. Percy was the first to notice they were missing. Guan Qiong had been overlooked due to the previous incident, but Harry's disappearance compelled him to report it to the professors. Rumors swirled in the Gryffindor common room. Some said they were going to the Chamber of Secrets to rescue someone, others that they were the target of another attack by the monster, and still others that they were with the professors because they were so important, receiving their close protection. However, these rumors were dispelled after Guan Qiong returned. Guan Qiong didn't elaborate, simply saying that Ron and Ginny had been rescued and that Harry was fine, merely unconscious. As for the rumors about the secret room, he could only refer the students to the professor's announcements. He felt it would be inappropriate to say more, and he was too lazy to elaborate. Everything depended on the professor's announcements. However, he hinted that the current state of security wouldn't last long. The school was now safe and would soon return to normal. This excited the students, who cheered in the lounge. Guan Qiong then retreated to his dormitory to rest. He was exhausted. Although only an afternoon had passed, it felt like 4 or 5 days. The information he had gained from the secret room and the various battles had consumed him, and the side effects of the future potion had left him physically and mentally exhausted. He slept for over 10 hours, waking at 10 o'clock the next morning. Upon waking, he found that, as he had promised, the school had lifted its security measures. Students no longer needed to be accompanied by professors for everything, nor did they have to return to the lounge after 6 o'clock in the evening. The professors likely entered the Chamber of Secrets to investigate the situation. A notice posted on the bulletin board clearly stated that the incident was over. The monster within, and the culprit behind the entire incident, had been eliminated. The details of how this was resolved were left unanswered, leaving only speculation. Someone asked Guan Qiong about this on the way, but Guan Qiong didn't respond, leaving the situation shrouded in mystery. After all, there were still many Slytherins, and who knew if killing their ancestral pet would lead to repercussions? Harry returned to the student's body the next day. He had only been struck by a sleeping spell from Guan Qiong, and the impact had necessitated a night in the hospital. Ron and Ginny needed further examination, especially after Guan Qiong informed Dumbledore of Tom's methods. Of course, Guan Qiong also shared other details with Dumbledore, particularly regarding Lockhart's situation. She even gave Dumbledore the tape recorder, which he then copied with a duplication spell. "Lockhart will get his due," Dumbledore told Guan Qiong. At this point, the second-year defense against the dark arts professor at Hogwarts also disappeared from the students' sight. The next time they heard about him was in the Daily Prophet, where he was sentenced to life imprisonment in Azkaban for intentional injury and fraud. As a result, People became more wary and fearful of the curse of Hogwarts' defense against the dark arts class. Although this was Lockhart's own fault, he had been safe for so many years, but problems arose as soon as he became a professor at Hogwarts. This made people think deeply. As time went by, Professor Sprout also brought good news. The Mandrake was fully mature, and those who were petrified could finally be saved. As for Hermione, she also returned to normal 2 weeks before the final exams and returned to the students. Everything is moving in a good direction. There should be 1 or 2 chapters left, and Volume 2 will be completed. Chapter 198 Lockhart's Legacy. I'm not saying anything, we just went through something terrible. Why do we have to take exams? Ron wailed, burying his head in the pile of revision materials before him. The most difficult subjects were history of magic and potions, 2 he had no confidence in. Because we're students, and everything was over long ago, you just used the excuse of taking another week off. Hermione pointedly at Ron. Ron snorted softly, then finally flipped through the materials in frustration, memorizing the information that seemed to never be able to be memorized. With only a week left until the final exam, all students were immersed in the most intense revision, even Fred and George, who had become quiet and subdued. Ron and Ginny were discharged the day after Hermione recovered. Dumbledore, having learned of Tom's method, quickly devised a spell to address this issue and examine all the students in the school. Fortunately, it was discovered that only Ron and Ginny showed signs of domestication, and Dumbledore magically corrected them. The entire school finally became safe, and there was only one thing left to do for this school year: the final exams. The trio also began to review intensively. Hermione also took the opportunity to pull Guan Qiong along and asked him to follow the review plan that Hermione personally formulated. However, compared to reviewing, Guan Qiong was obviously more interested in other things. In the lounge, Ron and Harry were still nervously doing the review questions revised by Hermione herself. The questions listed the content that Hermione speculated might be tested in the final exams, while Guan Qiong had already finished the questions and was now playing with a mask in his hands. It was a half-face mask that could only cover the nose and above. It was gray in color and covered with white fine lines, like the marks of broken porcelain. This was one of the trophies Guan Qiong had obtained from Lockhart before, and it was also the trophy he thought was the most interesting. Guan Qiong turned on the magic perspective, and the magic skeleton in the mask was clearly visible. Indeed, this mask contained no magical circuits but a magical skeleton, each interlocking with the other, some fitting tightly together, others flexing and rotating like joints. It was a magical item with controlled, yet incomplete, deformation. Guan Qiong smiled as he placed the mask on his face. He had recently used various methods to verify that the item was flawless, free of any traces of dark magic or curses. Only then did he feel comfortable testing it today. After donning the mask, Guan Qiong felt a chill. He then used magic to create an ice mirror that hovered before him. He then manipulated the mask with his hands, controlling the magic power. As he anticipated, as he moved, the mask's magical skeleton slowly merged with his face, disappearing, leaving only his face. Then, channeling the magic power in his hands, he began to manipulate his face. With his movements, the face in the ice mirror began to shift, transforming from a standard oriental appearance to something else entirely. Guan Qiong patted Hermione, who was buried in a book beside him, a smile in his eyes. "What's wrong, Qiong?" "Harry." Hermione looked puzzledly at the Harry next to her, then at Harry, who was buried in his homework across from her. "What's going on? How can there be 2 Harrys?" Hermione was a little shocked. "What's going on?" Ron looked up, followed Hermione's gaze, and also spotted the Harry next to her. "Oh my God!" Harry also looked at his other self in surprise, and said in disbelief, "What's going on? Are you Qiong? What kind of magic did you use? Polyjuice potion? Or transfiguration?" "No, transfiguration doesn't seem to have this effect," Hermione said in a series of words. "It's the effect of this magic item." Guan Qiong gently brushed his hand across his face, and the half-face mask fell into his hands, and his face returned to its original appearance. "I named it Shaper. It's Lockhart's stuff. I saved some of it." Guan Qiong smiled and handed the masks to Hermione, whose face was already full of anticipation. "How do I use this? What do I need to do?" Hermione held the mask and placed it on her face, somewhat bewildered. "Just put it on and imagine what you want to look like." Guan Qiong flashed a light and, using a freezing spell, created an ice mirror for Hermione. Hermione nodded and, under the expectant gaze of Harry and Ron, put the mask on. As Hermione closed her eyes, the mask began to blend into her face, and then, Hermione's face began to transform. It was clear that she was cautious at first, only slightly retracting her teeth, and then her face became softer, smoother, and more radiant. This made Hermione look much more beautiful. "Oh, my God, Hermione, you've become more beautiful," Harry exclaimed in amazement. "Yet, much better than before," Ron nodded, but his attention was focused on the mask, his excited eyes indicating that he wanted to try it for himself. Hermione opened her eyes, glared at them both, and then looked at the ice mirror before her. "Too bad this isn't the real thing," Hermione said with a hint of regret. "You'll be even more beautiful than this in the future." Guan Qiong flashed a light spot. "Thank you, June," Hermione nodded, then began adjusting more details. Her brows should be more open, her eyes should have more shape, her eyebrows should be thinner and longer, her mouth should be redder, and her nose should be higher. Her ideas were so numerous and so fast-paced that before one was even fully formed, another, which she thought was better, would pop up, causing her to constantly shift and become somewhat unnatural. "Don't change it, Hermione, it's a bit scary." Ron covered his mouth, feeling a little nauseous because Hermione's current appearance was too terrifying. Hermione turned her head and glanced at Ron, and Ron's unbearable expression almost made him fall to the ground. "That's enough." Guan Qiong reached out and removed the mask from Hermione's face. Hermione instantly returned to her original appearance, with long brown hair, a protruding front tooth that was not in the way, and a delicate face. It was clear that she was a beauty in her element, waiting only for time to refine her. Hermione unconsciously stretched out her hand to grab the mask, but Guan Qiong grabbed her hand. The two looked at each other, and then Hermione calmed down. "Well, I seem to be a little obsessed. You know, girls always want to be prettier." Hermione embarrassedly twirled her hair with her fingers and tilted her head slightly. If it were other things, she would still be a little wary, but the idea of becoming beautiful was much more tempting to her than ordinary things. After all, she was often called ugly because of her teeth when she was a child, although part of the reason was that she liked reading and thought they were childish. "Don't worry, you are beautiful, Hermione, and knowledge is your most beautiful thing," Guan Qiong chuckled. Then, he handed the mask to Harry beside him. "Be careful not to think too much, otherwise it will change very quickly. This thing is still quite interesting, as long as you don't lose yourself in it." Chapter 199 Lockhart's Legacy Part 2. "I'll give it a try," Harry said, nervously taking the mask in his hands. He'd been full of anticipation just now, but after seeing Hermione's expression, he felt a bit scared. After all, that constantly changing face was truly terrifying. Still, Harry put the mask on himself, closed his eyes, and imagined the person he wanted to become. Guan Qiong looked over with interest, noticing that Harry hadn't changed much. Just like Hermione's initial appearance, only minor adjustments had been made to his features. He looked older, his skin oilier, his expression more animated, and the scar on his forehead seemed to be trying to fade but remained unchanged. Harry looked like his older self, but Guan Qiong was clearly mistaken. "Oh my God, Harry, are you turning into your dad?" Ron exclaimed in surprise. Harry opened his eyes and looked into the mirror before him, seeing the man who looked so much like the picture Hagrid had given him last year. Harry smiled, and the person in the mirror smiled too. "Dad," he whispered softly, and the person in the mirror also spoke softly, his eyes softening and his expression becoming incredibly gentle. He'd seen his father in photos. Those photos, magically animated, still evoked a sense of unreality, because the gazes in those photos had never reached him. But now, he felt the gaze, simply looking at him, as if it were warm. No one spoke for a moment. After a moment, Harry removed his mask, rubbed his eyes, and a broad smile spread across his face. "Thank you, Jean." Nothing." Jean scratched his head, momentarily at a loss for words. "Here, Ron, it's your turn." Harry handed the mask to Ron. Ron took it, hesitant. After a moment, he gritted his teeth, put it on his face, and closed his eyes to imagine himself. His face began to change, a strange transformation. Sometimes it resembled Harry, the image he imagined himself growing up, sometimes like Hermione's. His eyebrows and eyes shifted, never reaching a clear destination, until he became a monster. "Ah, was this what I turned into before?" Hermione asked Guan Qiong, who nodded. After a while, Ron scratched his head in frustration and took off the mask. He hadn't managed to transform into a perfect character in the end. I didn't know what to transform into. I started thinking about becoming Headboy when I grew up, but I had no idea what Headboy looked like. Then I thought about Percy, but halfway through, I decided he was too weird. Then I thought about becoming Guan Qiong, trying to figure out what an Oriental person looked like, but I couldn't come up with the right look. Ron sighed. You have no goals, Ron. You're very lost. Guan Qiong took the mask back and put it away, then shone a light spot on Ron. You seem a little lost. Ron scratched his head. It must be because you don't read enough books. You just play all day and don't think about what you want to do in the future. Reading more will help you find your goals, Hermione said. So, with all the books you've read, what is your goal? Ron asked in return. HMPH, Hermione snorted, tilting her nose and glancing at Guan Qiong out of the corner of her eye. Of course I have a goal. I want to join the Ministry of Magic someday, and become Minister of Magic. Harry, what about you? Hermione asked Harry. Me. Harry lowered his head and thought for a moment. To become the best seeker in the world. Harry's tone was uncertain, but he did have that in mind. Then me. Ron glanced at Guan Qiong, the last one, but he felt he didn't need to ask. Guan Qiong's goal had always been clear, to learn more magic. My goal is to make the Quidditch team. I have to make it before I graduate, Ron said firmly. Okay, Ron, keep going, you can do it. Your goal now should be to finish this set of tests in front of you. Oh my god, it's been so long, and you haven't even finished half of it yet, Hermione said loudly, suddenly noticing the unfinished tests in front of them. It's not our fault. Guan Qiong's stuff is so interesting, Ron retorted, but he still had to lower his head and start writing under Hermione's oppressive gaze. The same was true for Harry, who wrote faster than Ron. Hermione looked at Guan Qiong. After testing the mask, Guan Qiong had nothing to do, so he started reading a book without Hermione's supervision. Hermione nodded with satisfaction and began to review contentedly. Just as they were immersed in their studies again, an owl flew in from the window of the Gryffindor common room and dropped a letter in front of Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong glanced at it and saw that the letter suddenly lost gravity during the fall and did not fall on the table and make a sound to affect other people. He took the letter in his hand and first looked at the cover. It was sent by an organization called World Adventure Accident Mutual Aid Association, and he had a guess in his mind. After opening it, there was a letter and some gold galleons inside. Guan Qiong took them out, a total of 20. Guan Qiong opened the letter and said, Dear Mr. Qiong, thank you very much for your assistance in establishing the World Adventure Accident Mutual Aid Society. According to the esteemed Mr. Dumbledore, it was you who exposed Lockhart's fraudulent nature, securing this substantial sum of money, which you are using to fund our establishment and to help those who have been deceived and harmed by Lockhart. You could have withheld this contribution, so we sincerely thank you. Furthermore, in accordance with your and Mr. Dumbledore's ideas, the World Adventure Accident Mutual Aid Society was established. We will help those who have been deceived or harmed during their adventures. Rest assured, we will do our utmost to do so. After all, we were once just like them. Finally, we invite you to become our honorary advisor. You could have been president, and to receive a monthly stipend of 20 gold galleons. Please accept it, thank you. Guan Qiong smiled, collected the 20 gold galleons, folded the letter, and put it in her pocket. Earlier, when dealing with Lockhart, Guan Qiong had found a number of items on him, one of which was the key to Gringotts. The wealth Lockhart had amassed over the years was hidden there. Unfortunately, Lockhart had set the key so that it could only be used in person, leaving Guan Qiong with no use. Once Lockhart was in Azkaban, the wealth would most likely be seized by Gringotts as unclaimed property. Given the Goblin Bank, this wasn't impossible. Guan Qiong certainly didn't want that, so he gave the key to Dumbledore, asking him to handle the matter. It was a last resort, and Dumbledore wouldn't let him get away with it. Sure enough, Dumbledore tracked down the original subjects of the biographies and established a collective organization in their names, legally transferring the wealth. The wealth then became the property of the World Adventure Accidental Mutual Aid Society, which aided adventurers harmed or deceived by their adventures. Dumbledore also offered Guan Qiong an honorary advisory position, essentially a sinecure, but with a monthly salary as a reward. Well, compared to Lockhart's own wealth, this wasn't much, but compared to Guan Qiong personally, it was the best outcome. After all, At his age and status, even if he came into possession of such a fortune, he wasn't sure he could keep it. According to Dumbledore, Lockhart's treasure trove contained nearly 40,000 galleons. It was unknown where he'd gotten it from, or how many evil deeds he'd done. Could writing books really be that lucrative? Guan Qiong couldn't comprehend it. Chapter 200 Luna's Reminder. The blazing sun shone brightly on Hogwarts Castle, and the Black Lake reflected its shimmering light, as if countless mirrors were swaying above it. Hogwarts' final exams proceeded as planned. Although the students had been somewhat nervous this school year due to the attack on the Chamber of Secrets, thanks also to Tom, their grades had generally improved, at least, better than last year. Guan Qiong, of course, passed all his exams with flying colors. He received perfect scores in history of magic, potions, and charms, and near-perfect scores in herbology, transfiguration, and astronomy. In the entire second year, only Hermione could match him. As for defense against the dark arts, Professor McGonagall dug out the test paper she had prepared in Lockhart's office. It was filled with strange questions, such as what Lockhart's favorite color was and what his ideal was. It was almost a replica of the first class test, only with more content and more detail. Professor McGonagall coldly tore up the paper and informed the students that there would be no exam for defense against the dark arts this year. It was a relief, after all, they hadn't learned anything in defense against the dark arts. After all the exams were over, the young wizard's time at Hogwarts began its final countdown. They only had to wait for the end-of-year banquet in 3 days before the school year officially ended. Finally, the exams are over. In the Gryffindor common room, Ron dramatically threw his stationery and materials aside without even a glance at them. He then picked up his wizard chess pieces and set out to have a fight. "Ron, what did you write for the last question in history of magic?" Harry, while not as fussy as Ron, sat across from Ron and set up the chess pieces with equal enthusiasm. He was exhausted, especially this week, with no recreational activities and all the time spent reviewing. He felt like a puppet, memorizing nothing but memorization. "I forgot," Ron exclaimed, his eyes determined. "Huh?" Harry scratched his head, but suddenly realized that the memory of the questions was rapidly fading from his mind, like fading ink. "Well, I forgot too," Harry said a little sheepishly, but seeing Ron's determined expression, he felt it was nothing. "Is there anyone who remembers questions after an exam?" "Well, it seems someone does." Harry looked at Hermione beside him. Hermione had already started packing her things to take back home and working on the homework the professors had assigned her during the holiday. "Oh, Hermione, don't be like that. The holiday is still a long way off," Harry said. "I'm very busy during the holiday." Hermione glanced at Harry and lowered her head. "Not only do I have to prepare for next semester's content, but I also have to go to remedial classes in human society. I have to learn magic, but I can't neglect my knowledge of human society." "Okay then." Harry didn't dare interrupt Hermione anymore. He looked around, ready to ask Gwen about her holiday plans. But he didn't see Gwen. She seemed to have been called away. "Thank you, Gwen," Ginny said, her face flushed as she thanked Gwen, holding Luna's hand. After she and Ron left the hospital, she learned from Harry that it was Gwen who had saved them and, to do so, had even fought a monster in the Chamber of Secrets. "That's a basilisk." Ginny had been looking for a chance to thank Guan Qiong, but the upcoming final exams kept everyone busy, and she felt a little shy. So she put it off. Until today, when the exams were finally over, and Luna happened to have something to ask Guan Qiong, so she followed along. "You're welcome. Mrs. Weasley and Mr. Weasley have taken great care of me," Guan Qiong smiled, flashing a light. Yet, Ginny nodded, exchanged a glance with Guan Qiong, then blushed and lowered her head. Guan Qiong laughed. Perhaps because of her young age, Ginny didn't look as brave and outspoken as in the videos he'd seen in his past life. But that was understandable. The Ginny in those videos was almost always 14 or 15, and Ginny was only 11 now. Growth always takes time, and she still needed some polish. Guan Qiong looked at Luna beside him. Luna stared at him with her silver eyes, as if her eyes were speaking. He had just returned to the Gryffindor common room when Ginny came over to tell him that Luna had something to ask him. The three of them then met in the corridor of Hogwarts Castle. "What's up, Luna?" Guan Qiong shot out a stream of light, which gathered together like a neat array of fireflies, flickering and illuminating their eyes. Are you going anywhere dangerous during your vacation? Luna drew her wand and waved it. Light also flew out from it, and under Luna's control, a line of words formed. The words were a little distorted, but the meaning was clear. The two lines of words, side by side, looked like fireflies holding a meeting. What an amazing talent! Guan Qiong watched Luna perform the illumination charm and sighed in admiration. Luna wasn't like him, who cast the illumination charm daily. Luna didn't have that need, meaning she didn't practice it daily like Guan Qiong did. But even so, her proficiency in the illumination charm was closing in on Guan Qiong at an unparalleled pace. Guan Qiong considered the question hovering before him and nodded. It might be a little dangerous, but it shouldn't be a problem. He did have a trip for the holidays. It had been planned long ago. There was more to this world than just Hogwarts. The wizarding world held so many mysteries. Wouldn't it be a waste of his life if he didn't explore? In his previous life, as a corporate slave, he'd been trapped in a small space, repeating a monotonous routine every day. In this life, with something as fascinating as magic, and no worries about life, how could he not give it a try? Luna looked at Guan Qiong, her golden hair flowing like sunlight shredded into strands. Her beautiful brow furrowed, her eyes fixed on Guan Qiong. After a moment, until Ginny, standing nearby, was puzzled, Luna spoke. You'll be faced with a choice, Guan Qiong. When the time comes, you'll need to choose the right. Her voice had a sing-song tone, like the chant of a ritual wizard, tinged with mystery. Did you see anything? Guan Qiong asked. Guan Qiong had also suspected something about Luna, convinced that she might possess some special gift, similar to Professor Trelawney, the divination professor. Guan Qiong had heard rumors about that person. Choose the right, Luna repeated, then hummed an unknown ballad and walked away, taking Ginny's hand. Ginny gave Guan Qiong an apologetic look and followed Luna away. What a crazy girl. Guan Qiong scratched her head, but still took note of Luna's words. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.